IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. I want to apologize for my lateness, everybody. I am on read duty today. My wife is running some errands, and so I had to get her meds because she's, as you guys know, she got sick and she's on a very strict med schedule, and I couldn't give them to her until about 2:10. So she's good to go. I'm good to go. So I'm ready to rock and roll. I hope you guys are all ready to rock and roll with me today. Today's show is going to focus on several things. It is Wednesday, so we're going to do a midweek rundown, and I'm going to do things a little bit differently today. I'm not going to dive into the normal, deep, thorough stats analysis that we've done, and there's a couple reasons why. Is number one, it's very hard to use the stats from this season for a host of reasons, mainly being that Purdue has only played one game against an FCS opponent that's not very good. The other reason is that this is a game where, Notre Dame, obviously, you can't use Notre Dame stats from last year. You can't really use Purdue stats from last year to compare them. So I'm going to focus a little bit more on just the matchup in general. We'll talk first about Purdue. I'll give you just a bit of, maybe 15 or so minute intro on the team. And we'll dive into just the Purdue team, their offense, defense, who they are. And then we'll get into game wreckers. I'll talk about who the game wreckers need to be for Notre Dame this week and who the game wreckers are for Purdue that Notre Dame needs to – potential game wreckers for Purdue that Notre Dame needs to make sure, that they're able to win this game and win this game the way that they need to win this game. And then we'll get into buy, sell, hold, because today's Wednesday. So today is Wednesday, buy, sell, hold. Joseph, I got these T-shirts. I love these T-shirts to clean my glasses, man. They clean my glasses way faster, and I don't have to keep buying boxes of them, and they do a pretty good job. So I like what I use. That they're these really soft cotton T-shirts, and they work phenomenal on my glasses. So yeah, you do you, buddy. I'm gonna handle my glasses the way I do them. I like it this way. It's some T-shirts will jack them up, but I have these like 5 specific T-shirts that are older that work great on it. So that's why I do that, man. So I got to get these glasses straight because I get very annoyed when I have smudges and stuff on my glasses. As you guys who know me know, I get very annoyed by things like that very, 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 very easily. But I'm back on track because we have a game to preview for this week. So Notre Dame Purdue game obviously it's a very important game for Notre Dame. I'm not going to rehash that a whole lot. We did talk about this yesterday, and it's just a game that Notre Dame. It's a must win for Notre Dame, and for all the reasons we explained yesterday. I don't know that this program can recover under its current leadership if you lose a second straight game to an opponent that is just not on your level. I don't know how you in year 3. I don't know how you can recover from that. A win is not everything is fixed, everything is awesome, but at least it gets you back on track because games like Saturday against Northern Illinois can be just devastating to your program if you don't handle it well. And we're going to find out if this team handles that well. One thing we have seen from Marcus Freeman. So there are trends that are clear of Marcus Freeman. Some are good and some are not so good. One of the not so good trends, and I wrote an article about this on Sunday, is they just occasionally don't show up for games. And I don't understand why. I don't know why. I'm not at practice, so I can't put my finger on it. They gave us very little access to fall camp. So clearly there's things that I couldn't see in fall camp that maybe could have allowed us to have a sense that maybe something like this was coming, but I doubt it because what we would have seen in fall camp would have been the same team that went out and beat Texas A&M. It's just, we saw it against Marshall. We saw it against Stanford. We saw it against second half against Navy in 2022. We saw it last year against Louisville. We saw it against Clemson last year. And then, of course, we saw it against Northern Illinois. However, what we have also seen from Marcus Freeman during his tenures, they tend to bounce back pretty well from those type of situations. And that is going to be something to where it gives me some optimism if we're looking at trends and we're looking at history. Northern Illinois shouldn't have surprised us as much as it did, which is a bad thing. That's not a good thing. That's not a defense. That's actually a really bad thing. But it's also a situation where when you look at this football team, you say they have kind of bounced back well from these moments. Will that continue to be true on Saturday against Purdue? We're going to find out, because I'm going to disagree with my guy Archer. I don't believe this is a 2-4 win football team from Purdue. I don't think this is a great team. I think this is a team that has a shot to be a bowl team this year. They have some very good improvements that they have. Some guys that are older from last year. You've got some new transfers in that help them. Their offensive line has been reconfigured a little bit. You've got their best tackles back. So there's some things to say this is a decent team, but this is a team that Notre Dame should beat, and should beat handily. I just don't know if they will. And that's kind of that's where we're at with this game is, Purdue is not any worse than Northern Illinois. That, and you're going on the road. You're talking about a team that beat Indiana State 49-0. Indiana State's only win in 2023 was over Western Illinois, and Northern Illinois' margin of victory over Western Illinois was comparable to what Indiana and Purdue's was over Indiana State, and they've had 2 weeks to prepare. So when you look at it and you take away all the context of what we saw from Notre Dame last weekend, and you just look at it on paper, this should not be a competitive game. This is a Purdue team that I said I think could potentially be a bowl contender, which puts them at what, 6-6? Where do you think that ranks them in the 18-team Big Ten? 10th, 9th, 10th, 11th? Right? So this is a team that you should dominate. But I don't know that Notre Dame is capable of that right now. I mean, based on what they did this past week. So, I just don't know what to expect from this team. But we're going to talk about who these teams are and who Purdue is, and then the matchups. And then, we're all going to find out together on Saturday, what this Notre Dame team is made of. And I'm very curious that we're going to see. We're going to see. So let's get into it. As I said, I'm going to talk about Purdue a little bit as a team. I'm going to get into game records for both teams, and then I'm going to finish with buy, so hold. So let's get ready to rock and roll. Real quick, too, by the way, USMA, I did not put you in timeout, so I'm not sure why you couldn't post, to be honest with you. So I'm not sure. Maybe StreamYard's being a little weird today, or YouTube's being a little weird today. So anyway, let's get rolling on this. So I want to begin with Purdue. And when I look at this Purdue team, here's basically where I see this football team today. And actually, let me just pause for a second, because I just want to kind of share something with you guys a little bit. So just to let you guys know, I'm going to try my best to stay locked in today, but today's been a very weird day, and September 11th is always a very strange day for me. I have a hard time focusing. My head is always kind of going in a million different places, and with everything that's been going on with Notre Dame, obviously it's been a challenge. So if I do get a little scatterbrained today, I do apologize in advance. I'm aware of it. I'm going to stay locked in and do the best I can, but I apologize in advance if I do have some of those issues. And so just wanted to share that with you guys as I restart here. So let's dive into the Purdue Boilermakers, Notre Dame's next opponent on Saturday. Purdue is a team, they're going into year 2 of the Ryan Walters era. Ryan Walters was the defensive coordinator at Illinois in 2022, an Illinois team that was a pretty good football team under Brett Bielema. And then Ryan Walters had obviously success there with Coach Bielema. That allowed him to get the job at Purdue. Prior to that, he was actually there 2 years, 21 and 22. Prior to that, he spent 5 years as either the co-coordinator or the defensive coordinator at Missouri. So he played defensive back at the University of Colorado. They're going into year 2. He's, I think, 39 right now, so he's a younger guy. And he's obviously a defensive-oriented coach, and we're going to dive into their defense, but this is his defense. Sorry about that. Um, so when you look at this defense from Purdue, this is going to be his defense. This is going to be a very unique defense, but this is a team that is what you'd expect from a defensive coordinator, and in that they're a physical team. They run the football. They are a big physical team on defense. The athleticism is not great on this football team, which is part of the issue that they have as a team. Is Salty. I realize I didn't hit mute in time. I understand. That's why I apologized. So when I look at this Purdue team, when you have a defensive head coach, a lot of times that team is going to fit a certain style, and that is true of Purdue. He's trying to recruit size. They want to play strong. They want to be physical. Those are the different things that they want to be, that they want to do as a football team. He's recruiting to that, and this is a pretty big football team, which is partially good because Notre Dame needs to prove that they can handle a big physical football team, but it's also partly bad because Notre Dame hasn't played well against big physical football teams so far this year. And so it does present a test. We talked about this last week. We talked about how Northern Illinois would present a test to Notre Dame because of how they play, the things that they did. And when you look at it and you think about, okay, well, we're sitting in this space a week ago. We're sitting here talking about how, Northern Illinois does this. They've got some athletes that you got to deal with, and they got some size up front, and it's going to be a good test. Well, it was more than a good test. And what gets me a little concerned about this matchup is if we get the version of what Notre Dame we got last week, they do a lot of similar things. I shouldn't say they do a lot of similar things because they're a very different team schematically, but they have a lot of similar traits to what made Northern Illinois a challenge for Notre Dame outside of one very important thing. They're not quite as experienced in this system and in this team as was Northern Illinois. They were a much more experienced football team. And so when I look at this matchup, that is one of my concerns about this matchup is this is a team that very much fits the mold of what right now is giving Notre Dame problems. I don't think it should give Notre Dame problems, but I'm also a realist, and whether or not it should or shouldn't, the fact is it is. And that's something that Notre Dame has to deal with when they get ready for this matchup. So let's begin with the Purdue offense. And you are going to recognize the name of their offensive coordinator is Graham Harrell. If obviously for longtime football fans like me, you remember him as a quarterback at Texas Tech, but he was also the offensive coordinator in the last few years under I am Todd Helton. I always want to say Todd Helton. Clay Helton. He was his offensive coordinator the last couple of years. Notre Dame has faced this offense. It's a little different version of what he did. One of the complaints I had about Graham Harrell when he was at USC was I didn't think they ran the football enough. And I thought that was something that actually kind of held them back a little bit offensively, is I didn't think they ran the football very effectively. His last year there, despite having Keontae Ingram, behind the Malapawa kid, they had Darwin Barlow in 2020. They had Stephen Carr, Marquise Stepp. They didn't run the football very effectively. In 2019, they averaged 118 yards a game. Then they were at 97 in 2020. 2021, they're at 145.6, and they only averaged 4.4 yards per carry. They didn't run the football very well. And they were a very throw-it, perimeter-oriented team. When you look at what Graham Harrell's doing at Purdue, and you started to see this start to show up a lot more late last season, was he has been more willing and focusing on running the football. Now, I think part of that is out of necessity because they don't have great skill players. And, we'll see kind of if that, how that plays out. But they are a team that's had decent running backs the last couple of years. They've got a pretty good offense. They have a solid offensive line. And last year, they showed promise rushing the football. Early in the season, they were very up and down, 109 against Fresno, 179 against Virginia Tech, only 80 against Syracuse. And then they went for 198 against Wisconsin and 189 against Illinois. And then, of course, 96 against Iowa, didn't run much against Ohio State, 123, 96 against Nebraska, only 125 against Michigan. And then they ended the season with 353 against Minnesota, 303 against Northwestern, and 178 against Indiana. Then they started this season off running the football extremely well. They ran for 248 yards in the season opener against Indiana State. Now, again, Indiana State is not a very good football team. They're actually a pretty bad football team, but they did what you're supposed to do. They went for 248 and averaged 8 yards a carry. And so if you look actually at their last 4 games going back to last season, Purdue's last 4 games, like I said, including this weekend's, they're 2 weekends ago game against Indiana State, they're averaging 270.5 rushing yards per game. And we hear a lot, I think Marcus Freeman said this, and I was listening to it on the broadcast of the Indiana State game. They talk about, Purdue was the leading rushing team in the Big Ten last year. Well, kind of. They were the leading rushing team in conference play last year, but they were 3rd overall in rushing because they only averaged 169.1 yards per game. But in conference, so obviously that started a little bit later. In conference, however, Purdue averaged 184.6 yards per game because, as I mentioned, they had a couple of those big performances running the football. So while true that they were obviously the top team in conference, and the next closest team was 14 yards behind them, over the course of the entire season, they were only at 169, which backs up kind of what I said, which is they got a hot late and piled up some big stats late, but also had a couple good games late in September. And then that really rough stretch. But the rough stretch included 4 games in a row against Iowa, Ohio State, Nebraska, and Michigan. That is very clearly the 4 best defenses they played last year. And they were barely over 100 yards per game in those games. So it's a team that wants to run the football, but their success has been a little up and down. But you're going to see that from this offense. You're going to see that. You're going to see a lot of quick perimeter screens. That's what you're going to see. They're going to run now screens. They're going to run bubbles. They're going to do a lot of different things motion-wise to try to get the ball on the perimeter and, try to get the ball to their playmakers. So when I look at Purdue, this version of Purdue, and you look at what they have on their offensive line, this is also a team that has, as I mentioned, a little bit of size up front in spots. Their left to right, there's 318, 300, 305, 316, and 300. So a couple guys that are 300-pounders, but then a couple other guys that are cropping up to 320. Size-wise, they're very similar to Northern Illinois. A little bigger in a couple spots, about the same in some other spots. And we watched Northern Illinois push Notre Dame around. And they're a veteran group. Their left tackle, center, and right guard are all seniors, and then there's left guard and right tackle are both juniors. So this isn't a young group of players. These are guys that want to come out and, as I said, run the football on you. I mean, first play of the game against Indiana State's a stretch play. So, hey, Notre Dame, you might want to actually be prepared to handle a stretch play and get pushed around. And that's obviously the matchup of this game that concerns me a little bit. Look, their pass catchers are decent on the perimeter. They're solid. They got one kid who's got some size to him. He didn't play last year, Jamal Edrine. He transferred in from Florida Atlantic 2 years ago. Shamar Rigby, 6'3". Jerron Tibbs is 6'3", 214. Cam Brown transferred from UCLA. He did not play in the opener. I don't know if he's on the depth chart. He didn't play in the opener. He's 6'1", 185. Denylon Morissette, I don't think he caught maybe one ball. He's 6'1", 200. Leland Smith is 6'4", 219. Their tight end, Max Clare, is 6'4", 240. Drew Bibber is the tight end who caught some balls on Saturday, the first game. He's 6'5", 245. So they have some big receivers. And so what I see them doing is quick perimeter throws and then trying to get the ball down the field to their bigger receivers. They're going to do some perimeter, back shoulder outcuts and things like that in regard to their receivers. And then, of course, they're going to use tempo a little bit to try to get you off base. They're going to move guys around. Graham Harrell does a nice job of mixing up personnel groupings and mixing up alignments, using some quick shifts and motions to try to gain some leverage, which a lot of teams do. And teams are definitely going to do that now against Notre Dame, but they do have a solid offensive line, do have solid pass catchers. And Hudson Card's a mobile quarterback. He's not a dynamic athlete at quarterback, but he's a mobile quarterback. He can hurt you. If Connor Wegman can hurt you as a runner, so can Hudson Card. And that's not a knock on Connor Wegman. I actually think Connor Wegman was a pretty good athlete in high school. It's simply saying, like, this is a similar type of kid, probably a little bit more athletic than Connor Wegman was. Or he's definitely more athletic, but a little bit more effective as a runner than Connor Wegman, because he can not only hurt you from the standpoint of scrambles if you lose discipline, but he's also a guy that they can do some things, bootlegs and read zones that can also hurt you and be effective in that regard. So that's how I look at this Purdue offense. It's not super talented. It's relatively well coached. They're experienced at the positions that matter most: quarterback, offensive line, tight end. Their youth is all on the perimeter at wide receiver. They've got some freshmen and sophomores playing at wide receiver. Youth doesn't bother me as much at that position. They're very experienced in the places that matter. And that's where Notre Dame is going to be challenged in this game. So Notre Dame's going to have to be prepared for that. Let's go to the opposite side of the field. And Ryan and I were chatting actually before the show, and so you don't see a whole lot of coaches anymore that run just 3-4 defense, just pure 3-4 defense. And they run pure 3-4 defense. I was actually going back and looking at the Ohio State game last year, and it was wild because even when Ohio State's in 11 personnel and not even in a situation where they're like in a run look, just 1st and 10, spreading the field, you'd still see Purdue in their 3-5 look. I'm actually going to take a little bit of a screenshot here. That's who they want to be. They want to be a team that is going to play 3-4. They want to get their big guys on the field. Here, let me get this clip up so you guys, this photo up so you guys can get a sample of what I'm talking about here. They are going to play the 3-4, their 3-4 defense, and they got 2 edge players that have some size to them. They're very big up the middle. The guards for Notre Dame and center are going to have a very long day. So let's look at this picture here real quick. You guys get a sense of it. This is against Ohio State last year. You can see Ohio State's in 11 personnel. They're in a 3-by-1 alignment, and Purdue is still in their 3-5 look. Now, there's some things that are going to present some opportunities for Notre Dame, which we'll get into tomorrow during our Keys to Victory. But as you can see this right here, against Purdue, you're seeing against Ohio State last year, a team that throws the ball quite a bit. They are still in their 3-5 alignment with the 3 down. So that is who Purdue is. They like to stay in that. They'll mix up some things a little bit. They'll drop guys into coverage and things along those lines, but they want to stay in that 3-4 personnel. They'll get real creative on 3rd down. That's when they'll mix up their personnel groupings and they'll do some different things from a look standpoint. That's when they'll blitz more. They don't blitz a ton. In 1st and 2nd down, they'll bring some like linebacker fires and edge pressures, but you're not going to see a real exotic situation. They're going to be physical. They're going to come at you. They're going to play downhill. That's what Purdue wants to do, and that's what they're going to try to do to Notre Dame in this game. So, and especially when you've seen what Notre Dame has done the first 2 weeks, I don't know how any team looks at Notre Dame right now and says, hey, let's put more athletes on the field because we're worried about them throwing the football. No, the only thing that Notre Dame has done at all well this year is run the football. And that's even been at times. So you're going to see them be very aggressive in that regard. And they want to, like I said, they got a very big interior. If you go look at their depth chart, which we have the Purdue depth chart at irishbreakdown.com, they go a true 3 down, 3 big guys alignment. They have Cole Brevard, who starts for them, number 91. He's an Indiana kid. He's 6'3", 333. If you go back and watch Ohio State game, I think it's like the first play of the game. They drop back to throw, and he just takes this guy, drives him right back into the backfield, discards him, and gets in the quarterback's face. Mo Omodode is my best shot at that, is the one smaller guy they have. He's 6 foot 286. The rest of their D-line, their number 0, Jeffrey Mba, really good football player, really solid football player, 6'6", 302. Joe Anderson plays a decent amount. He's 6'4", 290. And they got a kid named DeMarge Lewis, who I like a lot as well, number 34. He was pretty good against Indiana State. He's 6'3", 300. So this is a very good-sized unit. Then they have 2 true outside linebackers. Shita Silla, 6'4", 251. He's a transfer. He's on one side. And then on the other side, Will Helt is a really good football player. Another in-state kid, 6'6", 265. very talented player. Ryan and I were talking. He was talking to me about him the other day. He was popping the film on, and I'm like, this 15 is a pretty good football player. I see what you're talking about. Very long, quality athlete. He's more of a power athlete, in my opinion. He's a guy that could present some problems for the Notre Dame edge players. And then their middle linebacker, Kydron Jenkins, for some reason, he was an edge player for them last year. They moved him to middle linebacker. And he's a 6'1", 253-pound little middle linebacker. And then Yanni Karlaftis, Notre Dame fans should remember that name, not just because he's George's younger brother, but Yanni was recruited a little bit by Notre Dame for a while, is a 6'3", 235-pound linebacker. So as you guys can see, this is a very big, physical front seven, really, and Notre Dame's going to have to be prepared to handle that. That does present some concerning matchups, in my opinion, for this Notre Dame football team, because that's not something they've handled very well so far this year. So it's going to be a challenge. This offensive line is going to have to play well for Notre Dame, and they're going to have to be prepared for that, because this whole here's the thing. Like, a lot of us are saying, like, what are we saying? Like, I'm load the box and play the deep, stop the run, force Notre Dame to beat you with the pass. Well, that's kind of already what Purdue does. So it doesn't even require Purdue to have to adjust anything. They just have to play their defense, and Notre Dame's going to have to try to do something about it, because they're a team that when I look at this matchup, I see a Notre Dame team that's struggling to throw the football against a Purdue defense that doesn't have great secondary players outside of one player. They're solid, but there's a lot of matchups that should favor Notre Dame on paper. I see a Notre Dame team that's a little undersized on offense, very young on the offensive line, hasn't really been consistently getting a push in the run game against a really big physical defensive line that, when you look at how they performed last season, their rushing offense got a lot better last year. Their rushing defense got a lot better as well. And this is what they're designed to do. Early in the year, they struggled. They held Virginia Tech to 11, but they gave up 271 to Syracuse. They gave up 195 to Wisconsin, 149 to Illinois, 181 to Iowa, 152 to Ohio State, and 155 to Nebraska. And so obviously you're like, well, that's not real good. Well, then the last 4 games of the season, the most they gave up in any period of time was against Indiana, and they gave up 233 yards. But in the last 4 games of the year, they only gave up 114.3 yards per game and then 3.5 yards per carry. Well, in the opener against Indiana State, they held them to 104 yards rushing on 43 carries. It's only 2.4 yards per carry. So they started to figure out how that defense works, and they got better and better late in the season. And here's the thing about that. This wasn't against 4 bad opponents. The team that they got started off with was against Michigan. They held Michigan 110 rushing yards on 34 carries. Now, they got ripped up in the passing game, which is what we talked about, but Michigan only averaged 3.2 yards per carry in that game. They held Minnesota down, but then they shut down Northwestern's run game and held Northwestern to 2.9 yards per carry and 99 yards. So what you should want to do against this Notre Dame team right now is exactly what Purdue already does. And it's just like, hey, lean into who you are. And that's what I expect them to see. I don't think they need to do anything unique this weekend to, quote unquote, load the box. That's who Purdue already is. And Notre Dame's going to have to be prepared for that, because they're gonna basically say, if you're going to beat us, you're going to have to beat us throwing the football. That is absolutely, to me, how this game is going to go. And now, that doesn't mean Notre Dame abandons the run. There's ways to have a success running the ball. We'll talk about that tomorrow in the Keys to Victory. Notre Dame can and should be able to run the football with the talent they have. If you have to abandon the run because of how good Purdue is, this is going to be a long season for Notre Dame. Very long season for Notre Dame, because this is a quality front seven. It is nothing compared to what some of the other teams that they're going to have to face this year are going to throw at Notre Dame in the front seven, especially from an athleticism standpoint. But I'm just telling you, this is what they do. This is who they are. And Notre Dame's going to have to find some ways to go at it and have some success. So that's a little bit about this Purdue team. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on them. We'll talk more about them tomorrow in the Keys to Victory, as far as just who they are overall and what Notre Dame needs to do with them. But that's a quick look at what you can expect from Purdue. They are, again, folks, just preparing you. They are not going to be afraid of Notre Dame. Northern Illinois wasn't afraid of Notre Dame, and Purdue is definitely not going to be afraid of Notre Dame. Opponents for Notre Dame can see like this is there's opportunities to find some success against Notre Dame right now. And for a guy like Ryan Walters, this could be a program-defining win because as somebody was talking about earlier, again, I think Purdue is not a 2-4 win football team. I don't think they're that. I think they're better than that. But they do have a tough schedule this year. They play at Oregon State, Nebraska, at Wisconsin, at Illinois, home against Oregon, home against Northwestern, at Ohio State, home against Penn State, at Michigan State, at Indiana. There's a lot of potential wins on there. There's also a lot of potential losses on there. You've got, if you can catch this struggling Notre Dame team, this down Notre Dame team, and get a win, this is a career-defining moment for Ryan Walters. If they do struggle a bit this year because of how tough their schedule is, then this is something that they could do. And that's the mentality that they're going to have coming into this game. This is a huge game for Purdue, and Notre Dame needs to match that. They need to be prepared to handle that. And if they can't, then this is gonna be a long year. But hopefully they'll be able to match that because again, on paper, this is a game that should not be overly competitive. But the way that Notre Dame is playing right now, it's going to be a dogfight if Notre Dame doesn't find some answers and find them in a hurry. So let's next get into a little bit of a conversation about game wreckers. We like to talk about game wreckers on our Wednesday show. And Notre Dame certainly has some potential game wreckers. And, of course, Purdue has some as well. So when I look at this matchup, it begins with the Notre Dame offense. And there's a lot of potential – there's a lot of potential players I can look at, but I'm going to look at a couple. And I'm going to talk about game wreckers that should be game wreckers this weekend, that Notre Dame needs to be game wreckers this weekend if they're going to have success. And it starts in the backfield. I mean, right now, that's your best tandem right now. That's the best thing you've done so far this year is when your offense has made big plays, you've gotten the ball into the hands of Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. That is where your offense has been at its best. And when you get rocking and rolling, it's with those guys having the football. That means a couple things. Number one, you've got to lean more into them as runners. Part of that is also being a little bit more, I don't say creative, but multiple with how you get them the football. Doesn't mean that you need to run a bunch of different plays, but some different ways to get them the football within those looks. I think it would be very smart for Notre Dame to get the football to them in on the perimeter in the pass game. If they have a big physical front seven, that means those guys aren't going to run as well against as you would a unit that's maybe a little bit smaller. And when I look at this matchup with the size that Purdue has at linebacker, one way that I think you can slow them down is get those guys chasing the Notre Dame running backs and the Notre Dame speed. And obviously Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price are that. Yes, just playing downhill, you can't just play left and right. You've got to go at them at times. I want to see a mix of the outside zone with the inside zone. I want to see some counters. I mean, Indiana State blocked up a counter against Purdue in the opener that if they had a running back like Jadarian Price or Jeremiah Love, they might have popped that sucker out the backside and had success. I think they went like overload trips to the left, ran counter tray back to the right. And boy, was one missed tackle away from taking that thing for a big play. And that back wasn't anywhere close to what Notre Dame has running back. So your traditional run game has to be effective. But again, they're going to have a lot of numbers there. You've got to do some things to soften them up, doing some, quarterback power, doing some things where you're running your jet sweeps with them. I would say this is the week where it would be very wise to maybe go with some 21 personnel type looks and get some action there. So these are all things that I want to see maybe do like a sweep action one way with a counter the other way and just read certain things. There's a lot of creative things you can do in the run game that doesn't put a lot on your line. It puts more on your quarterback to make proper reads in the run game. And, so that could be a challenge as well. But there's a lot of things that they can and need to do to get those two guys the football. I would say get creative in the pass game with them. If you don't find ways to get Jeremiah Love matched up in the pass game against their linebackers and safeties, I'm not sure what you're trying to do at this point in time. First of all, he's a dynamic playmaker. He's already proven that. Second of all, the way that they play defense, they're going to put a bigger safety or a linebacker on him if he lines up out wide. But you're definitely going to have a linebacker or a outside linebacker which is basically a defensive end in a 2-point stance, matched up against him in the pass game. You've got to find some ways to get him the football in that situation, and with Price, because they're going to somewhat look for it with Love. I don't know that they're going to be looking for it with Jeremiah Price. And honestly, I would steal a page from Northern Illinois with the play that they ran, where they ran a jet sweep, bring Jeremiah Love on in action, and then have Jadarian Price fake like he's a lead blocker and just run him on a wheel route. See if you can catch him. I would do that. Why not? But that's the kind of creativity that we need to see from Notre Dame to get their playmakers the ball, because these two kids flat out are game wreckers. They've already proven to be game wreckers. And this is a game that is built for them to use their speed to make big plays. The more you can do with different backfield actions, where maybe you're running outside zone one direction and you've got your other back kind of swinging back out to the right, just something to get them thinking their eyes going in different places. And if they crash backside against the outside zone, you can pull that sucker and throw a bubble. And there's a lot of different things that you can do to slow down Purdue's hard vertical charge, which is what they're going to do in this game to try to slow down Notre Dame's run game. So look for these two guys to be potential game wreckers in this game. It certainly needs to be something where the coaching staff is going to do that. You want to take some of the pressure off Riley Leonard, get these two cats going in the run and pass game. And if Riley Leonard's injured and can't go for some reason, which we're told he's practicing, he's going to play, we'll see. Who knows? This could be gamesmanship by Purdue. I don't really believe a lot of what I am told about this situation right now. But if he can't play and you've got Steve Angeli in the game, which is, let's be honest, that's what Notre Dame is going to do, whether you like it or not. Some like it, some don't. It is what it is. Then even more so what you need to lean into this stuff and get him going. Game record number 2 for Notre Dame needs to be Mitchell Evans. So we saw Mitchell Evans get more involved in the offense last week, and that was obviously good to see. Well, at least he got more involved in the offense in the first half. He didn't do it. Never got him the ball in the second half, but this is certainly a game where hopefully you can get him a little bit more from him. He did play 22 snaps last week. 17 of them were in the pass game. We're running pass routes, I should say. So you finally got to see a little bit of Mitchell Evans last week. This is a game where I think it could be a huge Mitchell Evans game. And again, the way that Purdue plays, they're going to do a lot. Purdue runs some really interesting coverages. They do a lot of cover 1 and cover 3. But they also do a lot where they show single high, and then their boundary safety be kind of down in the box. And at the snap, he'll take off running over top is almost kind of like a cover 2. But either way, whether he's in cover 1 or cover 2 against that look, I'm running my tight end at him a lot. I'm going to try to get Mitchell Evans matched up against their linebackers in the pass game. The 3-by-1 pass game to your number 2 and number 3 receiver needs to be a huge part of this game. And running some flood concepts, some corner routes by 2 and 3, some seam routes, some post-snap switch stuff, some levels concepts with 2 and 3. This needs to be a game where those guys feast. And I guess I should probably include my number 3 game wreckers. You got to get somebody at receiver going. A potential guy to get going is Jaden Greathouse as part of what I'm talking about here. Possibly Jaden Harrison in certain looks too, where you actually do things more with him getting down the field, not just running stuff behind the line all the time. But Greathouse, Jaden Harrison, and maybe this is a week for them to have an impact, because there's some really good over the middle of the field matchups in the pass game that you can go to. And then even though if it's not an over the field route, certainly some things, some outbreaking stuff to your number 2 and number 3 against matchups that really favor you in the pass game. So that's got to be a position. And then I'd like to see somebody outside step up and have a big game, and not just catching comebacks and tunnels. And that's really all Bo Collins has done outside of one catch. And I'm not knocking Bo. He hasn't got the opportunities to do much outside of that. What I'm saying is, as an offense, you need to give those outside receivers a chance to go make a play. And they haven't really been given a lot of chances to make plays. I mean, you've seen guys kind of get open over the middle of the field and the ball doesn't get thrown. You've seen him, Jaden Greathouse, yes, he missed the ball last week, but he did have another opportunity later. But, Chris Mitchell in the first game had a couple shots where he was open and the ball was not accurately thrown or wasn't thrown at all. Bo Collins was throwing the ball 3 times downfield against Texas A&M. He caught 2 of them. And one of them was a comeback route, but he caught the other the back shoulder route. And then the other one, he was open and the ball was off target and you get the ball. So you've got to give your outside receivers a chance to make plays. And I understand there's always this desire run your system. But sometimes it's as simple as like, look, we're designing this play for number 10 to get the football, or number 11 to get the football, or number 5 to get the football. But you've got to do some things to get your outside receivers going. And I don't want to hear you get them going. Get them going. Right? We're not talking about, this isn't Georgia. You're not playing Georgia. You didn't play Georgia last week. I don't want to hear about, no, Notre Dame's talent's not as good as people. Even if it's not as good as we thought it was, it's still better than Northern Illinois, and it's still better than Purdue. And if you don't trust your guys against those two teams, how in the world can you trust them against Louisville or Georgia Tech or Florida State or USC, or heaven forbid you get into the postseason, you get into the playoff, and some of the defenses you're going to face in the playoff? You've got to get your outside receivers going. And if you can't do it over the next 2 weeks, I don't know when it happens. So I want to see the outside receivers get a chance to be game wreckers. And I'm not talking about just throwing go balls. I would definitely like to see that against some of the looks that Purdue shows. But I'm also talking about doing things to get them running, doing things to get them across the field, where you try to run the coverage off and bring them underneath and get them some ISOs to catch the ball in space. That's what being an OC is about. It's about finding ways to get my best playmakers the football in space. That's what it's supposed to be about. And right now, teams have a good read on your slot fade. Okay, so do some stuff with that. Do some different matchups with that. Maybe instead of, just the outside slot fade, maybe you do something where you do more of a stack. And, you run the guy on like a pivot under. And so now you've got the slot fade. If you like the matchup, you can take it. But now that flat defenders get put in a lot more of a bind right now, which we saw against A&M in the video breakdown, where he kind of was sat between the hitch and the quick option. Well, now you put him in a little bit more of a bind if you run it out of a 2x2 or even a 3x1, where maybe you mix up the matchups a little bit. So, have some things where, hey, teams are prepared for this. So you've got to have some wrinkles built in to attack them. And that's something that we need to see Notre Dame do a little bit more of this week. And that's going to require the outside receivers to get more opportunities. And when those opportunities come, you need to make them. Everything right now for the outside receivers is relatively quick. Stops, outs, comebacks. There's not a lot of deep stuff. We did see a pick on one of the few deep balls, but there needs to be more. There needs to be some go routes, some dig routes, some deep in cuts, some things to get them the ball, and then they need to be allowed to chase more, get some crossers, some over, some clear outs, things like that. So I want to see a little bit more variety in the pass game this week, and hopefully that can be something to get your quarterback going. I just want to see more vertical stretch and less of the horizontal stuff from Notre Dame this week. That's true if Riley Leonard's the quarterback, and that's true if Steve Angeli's the quarterback. I don't care who the quarterback is. That is absolutely needed this week. And I think it also puts their team in a bind. And this, if you can't get play action going against this team, then I don't know when you ever get it going. This is a week built for play action passing, because you do have some matchups that you can exploit. I would like to see, some 12 personnel even stuff where you can get going on the outside. You've got to be careful what you do against 12 personnel, because they will play that single high safety over the top. But there's certainly some opportunities to get the play action game going this week against Purdue, and I want to see Notre Dame take a chance at that. And then the last one for me, and this is important, the interior of the offensive line. And this kind of ties in a little bit to who the game wreckers are for Purdue. The interior of the Notre Dame offensive line has been okay so far this season. They've had some good moments, not great moments. That unit needs to be better, and it needs to be better now. And this is a game for that, because this is a big, physical, and experienced interior Purdue defensive line. They're not super, super athletic. They're just big, and they're physical, and they're experienced, and they play hard. They get a very good push. They like to drive offensive linemen off the ball, and that's how they like to blow up the opponent run game, is to just get that really hard inside push. And it's going to come down. They're going to have a lot of times where they're going to basically, it's almost like a bear front, where you're going to have your guards and your center are both covered either pre or post snap. So I say almost like a bear front, because I haven't seen Purdue just line up like that a ton, but they'll do a lot of stuff where you've got your center covered, you've got one of your guard covers, and then post snap, that guy's in a 4-eye inside shade of the tackle, but he's going to crash inside and take on that other guard. That means it's big boy football week for your interior offensive line. And if this unit's going to have a breakout, this needs to be the game, because if they do have a breakout, the interior of the offensive line plays really well, then the Notre Dame run game should be able to create some gashes and some slashing opportunities in the run game against this team. And then also, it's going to be very important. They're going to have to hold up against the pass pro. Now, Purdue doesn't do a ton, like I said, on first and second down of bringing a lot of pressure. What they like to do to create pressure, from what I can tell from late last season, is obviously they're going to let their edge players get after the quarterback, which they did last year, but also they like to use their interior defensive linemen to just push the pocket back and get in the quarterback's face. It's not that they produce a lot of pressures, but they're trying to make you uncomfortable by pushing the offensive lineman back into the pocket. And then they kind of rely on that to be a way to have pressure. And their two edge guys last year, the kid that's at Texas A&M, and then Kyron Jenkins, who's now at linebacker, they combined for 92 pressures last year. So now you're going to have to figure out ways to kind of get that going. Will Helt is obviously a guy that they're going to use for that this year. And then they're going to, like I said, they're going to try to use their interior defensive linemen to get a lot of pressure. And we saw that in the opener. Cole Brevard had 3 pressures in the game. Jeffrey Mba had 2 pressures in the game. Jamarius Dinkins had a pressure in the game. So their interior had several pressures in this game, and they're gonna get after it. So Notre Dame is going to have to be prepared for that and have a game plan, because they're not super easy to run on the perimeter as far as their tackle, their edge players. They're big, long guys, but you can do some things if you can get a push up the middle that allows you to get a little bit of a stretch and open up some holes and put those edge players in some binds, and that's where I think Notre Dame can have some success. Then when you look at defensively, I've already talked about the guys that I'm concerned about for Purdue. I'm concerned about Will Helt, who had, I think, 2 sacks last week, several pressures in the game. 6'5", 6'6" kid, 250, really quality athlete, big power player on the edge, athletic power player. And then the D tackles. They're going to be very aggressive, trying to get into Notre Dame's linemen, push them off the ball, and not let Notre Dame get any kind of push. That's going to be a big part of what they do. So Notre Dame is going to have to be prepared to handle them. And then the last one's Dylan Thieneman, the safety, who was a freshman All-American last year. He's a preseason All-American this year. Had 6 interceptions last year as a freshman. They ask him to do a lot. He plays a lot of center field for them. He'll play off the hash quite a bit. He's super instinctive. He'll come down in the box. At times, they'll roll the other safety back and bring him down and allow him to kind of rob a little bit in over the middle. But he's a guy that Indiana State just avoided last week. I mean, just flat out avoided him. But in 2023, teams didn't avoid him as much because he was a freshman, and he did pretty well. He had a very good freshman season. They don't put him in a lot of man coverage situations. He only gave up 16 catches last year. Actually, he only gave up 5 catches last year, according to Pro Football Focus, for 86 yards, because, again, he's just not the man in coverage a lot. He's a guy, he does a lot of the over-to-the-top stuff, coming down stuff, taking away the alleys and things along those lines. So you're going to have to be prepared for that. You can't lock in on an outside receiver. I keep talking about throwing the ball outside. You're going to have to do some manipulating with him with your eyes as a quarterback. If you just drop back and lock in on a perimeter route, he will read that and fly over. He's a big, tall, long kid. He will fly over there and get to that football. So you're going to have to be smart. You're going to have to trust your reads, throw with some conviction this week, but then also be smart to use your eyes to manipulate their deep safety and make sure that you're not taking him right to where you want to go with the football. That's going to be a big thing, because as he showed last year, he can certainly wreck a game with his range and instincts on the back of the defense. On the other side of the ball, let's look at the Notre Dame defense, and it's very similar to what my concern is with Purdue. It's got to start up front. You've got 2 defensive tackles that people considered, rightly so, one of the best defensive tackle combos in college football coming back this year. And simply put, they haven't played like it. They haven't played like a one of the best defensive tackle tandems. Howard Cross has had a couple good plays against A&M. Riley Mills had a couple good plays against Northern Illinois. But outside of a couple flashy plays, they've been very mediocre so far this season. If you just grade them without context, they've just been very, slightly above average. If you then grade it in the context of what the expectations are and what they're capable of, they've been well below their standard so far this season. And they're going to have to play a lot better, because this is a game where you're going to need them to be at their best. Absolutely need to have them be at their best. And everybody likes to use Riley Mills as the whipping boy. Howard Cross hasn't been any better. Neither of those guys have done a dang thing so far this season. And that's been a huge disappointment so far this season. And I don't know what the reason is. I don't know if it's because they a little too much hype. Maybe they thought they were better than they were. Maybe teams have been looking at them and saying, hey, this is the case. And look, Howard Cross hasn't been banged up as much as he had a hamstring injury over the summer, so they limited him. Like there's no excuse for either of those guys to play poorly. They both need to be better, and Notre Dame needs them to be better. So this is a game where it's like, hey, here's the other thing too about those two guys. One guy's a preseason All-American, one guy's a captain, and they're giving you nothing that you would expect, at least nothing relative to what you expect from a captain, 3-year starter, and a guy who's a preseason All-American, right? Like that is the most disappointing thing about both of those guys is you expected so much. They're considered leaders. Mills was named a captain. Everybody thought Cross would be a captain, and they've come out the first 2 games, and outside of a couple plays here and there from the both of them, they're not giving you a whole lot. And that's incredibly disappointing. And I hear people, oh, it's because they're undersized and small. Guys, this is the same group as last year. They're actually bigger than they were last year when you look at the guys that are playing. This isn't about they're undersized. This is about they're not playing well. And I don't know if it's them. I don't know if the defensive line coach is not getting them prepared to play, if it's a little bit of everything. But the fact is this group is not playing good football. They're not playing hard. They're not playing with great motor. They're not attacking the football. There's a lot going on here, and Al Golden's got to find some answers. He's got to push the right buttons with motivation during the week, but then also with play calls. Let these guys maybe attack a little bit more. But there's a lot missing. It's not just that. So let's get more technical with it. The twists that Notre Dame does are super slow and not timed well. That's understandable with the linebackers because they're new, they're young. But the fact that you've got defensive linemen that are struggling to handle twists and stunts when they're the same guys as last year, that's unacceptable. And Ray, are they not undersized in the rotation? No, they're not undersized. There's plenty of teams that are that way. There's one guy that's undersized. But again, it's the same guys as last year. They didn't play this poorly last year. That's the whole point. So if being undersized is the problem, why wasn't it a problem last year? That's the point. You're looking for excuses, and the excuses aren't their lack of size. The excuse is they're not playing well because they were the same. They're the same size they were last year. They're not playing well, and their size wasn't the issue last year. It is this year because of why? Why? Is all of a sudden they're just happen to be playing bigger teams? That's not the case. They're not playing well. They're not playing hard. They're not playing focused. And they're also not being turned loose. So there's a lot to go around. And they're going to have to find some answers. One answer I would like to see is playing Armo Muka more instead of Donovan Heinisch against teams that want to run the football a lot. Because otherwise, when you put Donovan in, you need to let him attack more. And they're not. But there's a lot going on here. But this is the game that you've got to get them right. This is the game where they've got to get back on track, these two kids. And if they don't get back on track this week, you start to kind of ask yourself, okay, are they going to? I mean, look, you just lost to Northern Illinois. Your team captain, your preseason All-American are not playing like either anywhere close to that. If they don't have some intestinal fortitude and pride to say, hey, look, we're going out this week and we're going to ball, then you have to start getting to the point where I don't know if it's going to happen the way that we expected it to happen, the way that it was last year. And I see all these conversations about, well, I'd like to have bigger D linemen. Okay, great. That's fine. But that has nothing to do with the issue that Notre Dame is having right now because it's the same guys as last year. They're a year older. There should be a year stronger. They're not playing well. You've got to find your answers why, because you're not going to go out in the portal and get a 320 defensive tackle for this weekend's game. This is what you've got. And it's the same guys you had last year. So you got to find some answers. Well, Rubio's hurt. Rubio missed several games last year. That's where you got to go. So at this point in time, those two kids have got to step up and be game wreckers this week. And if they are, Purdue's going to have a very tough time offensively. Very tough time, because a lot of the stuff that you like to do in the run game, if you're Purdue, it doesn't work that well if your interior is getting blown up. They like to do a lot of wraps. They like to do a stretch. They'll run some it's inside zone, but it almost kind of looks like mid zone. But a lot of the stuff that they like to do, the counters, the misdirections, things along those lines, all that stuff is predicated on winning the battle inside. And if Notre Dame dominates inside like they should, then you're going to struggle. And somebody said, I think Notre Dame's missing JJB in the run game. I don't agree with that. Josh Burnham's been very good in the run game so far. This is up the middle. Their problems are up the middle. Their edge has actually been decent against the run. Their problems have been up the middle and at linebacker. And that's where they've got to get better. And that leads me to the second one. Drake Bowen and Kingston Viliama-Asa, the two Mike linebackers, need big games this week. You're going to have to be instinctive. They're going to have to attack downhill. They're going to need to not only do it on their end, but you're going to need to trigger them a little bit more this week as the coordinators. This is a big week for your middle linebackers in the run game, but it's also a week where they're going to try to go at you in the pass game. They're going to try to get your linebackers isolated in the throwing game with backs out of the backfield, with high-low concepts over the middle with their tight ends. So your middle linebackers are going to get threatened a lot. They've got to have big games. If Drake and Kingston can kind of bounce back, neither of them played very well last week. If they can bounce back and be better, then they can be game wreckers in this game. And then the last one for me is Christian Gray. This is a team that is going to attack the perimeter with their passing game a lot. They're going to put Christian Gray in a lot of binds. They're going to go at him with their RPO game. They're going to go at him with perimeter screens. They're going to go at him with where it's the guy on him. So if Christian's off, they'll just throw a little now screen. He's got to come up and charge. They did that first two plays of the game against Indiana State, and corner came up on the first one, misses, and the guy goes running for a big play. They're also going to take some shots against him down the field, and he's going to have to be prepared for it. They're going to run some play action post shots. They're going to take some go balls. They're going to try to hit him with double moves. They're going to go hard at Christian Gray this weekend, and he's got to step up, and he's got to be a dude for Notre Dame this weekend. And I thought Christian was solid this past weekend against goodness gracious, Northern Illinois. I thought Christian was solid this weekend. He wasn't great. He was good. I mean, they only caught, I think, one ball on him for, let me see here, 2 yards. I haven't done my breakdown of that yet, but he's going to get tested this week because they've got big, tall, 6'2", 6'3", 6'4" receivers, and they're going to try to take advantage with some shots down the field off of double moves, play actions, things along those lines. And Christian Gray is going to get tested. He's going to have a chance to have a big impact on this game. So Notre Dame needs him to be a game wrecker this week. Speaking of that, when you look at their game wreckers, I don't know that offensively they have any players that necessarily scare me just because of their great talent, but they do have some size. And there's a couple guys that when I look at this matchup that get me a little bit just concerned in similar fashion to the way that I was concerned about the matchup against Texas A&M, which is they've just got a couple bigger guys that you worry about, can they go at you and be successful? And obviously I talked about them earlier, Leland Smith, who's 6'4", almost 220. And then you got Jamal Edrine, who is a guy that 2 years ago at FAU caught 39 passes for 570 yards. The Leland Smith kid is he's a JUCO transfer. He's in his first year at Purdue. He's a big kid. I worry about them on the perimeter with the screen game, with the downfield game, the vertical game. I think it was Edrine was open on a post route for what should have been a long touchdown, and the quarterback just missed him. And they're going to go at those shots again for Notre Dame. And so that's a concern. And then the other one is the tight ends against the Notre Dame linebackers. If I'm looking at this game and I'm looking at my tight ends, if I'm Purdue, caught 8 balls for 92 yards in the opener and a touchdown. Max Clare and then Drew Bibber. Decent players. The Clare is a good football player, led their team in receiving in the opener. They're going to get some matchups against the Notre Dame. I would. If I was a coach, I'd look at the linebackers and say, hey, I'm going to get my tight ends matched up on them in a lot of different situations. And also, as a team that likes to blitz, there's some things that I would do with some high lows over the middle involving my tight ends to try to catch Notre Dame in a blitz. Or if I can get one of those guys going, I can maybe get a catch and run with one of my players. So the tight ends are the other one. And then the final potential game wrecker for me is Hudson Card. I like Hudson Card. I think he's a good quarterback. He's not a great player, but he's a good player. He's got a nice arm. He's experienced. He's a good athlete. Last year he rushed for 5 touchdowns, 203 yards. He's a guy that can scramble a little bit, but I'm more concerned about him not so much scrambling, but more so just you over pursue, a run lane opens up, and he takes off runs for 10 to 15 yards. I think those could be some really early in the game plays that you think you've got him stopped on 3rd and 7, and then he steps outside of the blitz and then takes up that crease, and he's gone for first down. So that's the final one for me. There's nobody in this offense that I look at and say that guy by himself is a problem, like Ontario Brown for Northern Illinois last week, like some guys that we'll be talking about for teams like Louisville and Georgia Tech and USC coming up. But they're just a solid all-around unit that plays hard. They've got size. So what I think is smart about what Ryan Walters has done and what this offensive staff has done is they don't have a lot of speed. And it can be kind of hard to recruit a lot of speed to Purdue. And so what they've done is, while they try to build the roster the right way, they've said, okay, well, what we can do is we can get size. And so we can attack you with size. And that's exactly what they do. So when you look at Purdue's offensive line, again, good size line, 318, 300, 305, 316, 300. They got tight ends are 6'4", 240, 6'5", 245. And their receiving core is, this is the size of their receiving core, 6'3", 215, 6'4", 219, 6'3", 187, 6'4", 214, 6'1", 185, 6'1", 200. That's their receiving core. And then their running backs, Maccabee is 207 and Reggie Love's 205. Jaheim Merriweather 6'2", 210. And so this is a team that has a lot of size, and they are playing to that so far. At least they did in the opener. We'll see what they do moving forward, but they did a really nice job of playing to that. We're big, we can block, we can get down the field. That's what we're going to do. And they leaned into it in the opener, and I fully expect them to lean into it against Notre Dame, because that's what Notre Dame has struggled with so far this season. So I'm very curious about this matchup from that regard. If Notre Dame shuts this Purdue offensive team down, it's not a huge accomplishment like, holy moly, defense is back on track. But it's a good sign, because this is at least a competent offense with some matchups that give you some problems and some good experience at important places. So it's going to be a test. And then, of course, on the other side of the ball, again, a very veteran team in the trenches, a little younger on the outside. They've got a true – actually, their starting corner, Terrian Grant, is a true freshman that was supposed to be in the 25 class that reclassified to 24. Like, nobody talked about it. He was like a really highly ranked guy coming out of high school. And he goes to Purdue, kid from Tennessee, reclassifies and goes to Purdue. And he's starting for them already. So they've got some youth on that side of the ball. Thienemann's only he's a true sophomore. I think a true sophomore. But Grant was a top 100 recruit coming out of high school and signed with Purdue. Nobody talks about it because he reclassified. So he's 6'2", 6'3", big kid. So there's a lot. There's some youth in the secondary, but for the most part, this is a veteran football team at the positions that matter. Trenches, quarterback, linebacker, tight end. They've got some very good experience. So they're going to be a challenge for Notre Dame unless Notre Dame brings their A game. If Notre Dame brings their A game, this game won't be close. But we haven't seen Notre Dame come anywhere close to bringing their A game on offense, and they did bring their A game, I'd say B-plus game against Texas A&M on defense. B-minus, C-plus game on defense. So they're going to have to be ready to really bounce back. And it's going to be an emotional week for Notre Dame. You know, everybody that loved them and told them how great they were last week thinks they all suck now. You guys are jokes, booing them when they come up field. And, I mean, again, I'm not a big fan of booing personally, but I get it. I get it. I mean, it's one thing to lose. It's one thing to not play well. It's another thing to not play hard. And I know that's what bothered me for this past Saturday. And I'm sure that's what bothered a lot of Notre Dame fans who spent, like, I get into the games for free. I don't have to pay to go to games. I don't have to pay for parking. I don't have to pay for food. I don't have to pay for my seat. I get it for free. If I spent $100 on parking, hundreds of dollars on my tickets, and I'm sitting there watching this team not play hard, I'd be pretty pissed. And so I get it. Again, personally, my personal opinion, I'm not a fan of booing just for poor play, but I get it. And so, there's a lot that this team is going to have to overcome this week mentally and emotionally to get physically and mentally ready to play. And if they don't, this is going to be a dogfight and a game that they can lose. If they respond well, then they can, don't know that they will, they can come out and hammer them. And I don't want to hear this stuff, especially now that they're all paid. Look, guys, I get that they're paid now. Being paid doesn't make you more mature as a 19-year-old than being not paid. These are still 18 to 21-year-olds. Right now, of course, that means that you're old enough to do certain things. You're old enough to go fight in a war. You're old enough to be drafted. You're old enough to, all these type of things. But these are still 18, 19. I don't care if a kid's 18, he's making $1 million. He's still an 18-year-old. He's just an 18-year-old who's very physically gifted. Doesn't mean because you're physically gifted doesn't mean you're more mature than the typical 18-year-old. Doesn't mean spiritually you're more advanced than the typical 18-year-old. Doesn't mean emotionally you're more advanced than the typical 18-year-old. So this notion that now they make money, you can be even harsher on them, I don't accept that at all. You've got to be able to get these guys prepared. And again, I know what you're talking about, booing and all. I understand booing whether they're not paid or paid. It's about effort. But these are still some of these are kids. Like as I mentioned, Notre Dame's got 9 starters on their offense that are freshmen or sophomore eligible, which means a lot of those guys are still teenagers. Okay, so you guys, if it makes you feel better to convince yourself that they're grown-ups and professionals now just because they make money, you do you. But these are still young people. The point is not to say you can't boo them or whatever. The point is but to say they're not going to handle everything the way that we would as adults who are 40-year-olds and we've been through some stuff. And so that's what makes this a challenge this week for Notre Dame is you've got to figure out how to get this group of players and a lot of them are very young, to bounce back mentally and emotionally from what they did this past weekend. That's the key. Because if they don't handle that well, if they don't bounce back well, this is going to be another tough game. It's going to be a very tough game. If they respond well and the focus is there, then I think this is a game they win convincingly. That's kind of where I'm at on this matchup. So I'm going to get into buy, sell, hold. Actually, those are game records. I'm going to get into buy, sell, hold here next. But before we do, folks, do me a favor. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. We greatly appreciate that. And of course, as always, make sure that you sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Final part of today's show, I hope that we're going to have a little bit of fun because we're going to jump into the buy, sell, hold. As you all remember and should know, if for those who are new, buy, sell, hold is for subscribers only of the message board. They will put their submissions on the board, and I will bring them in, and I will answer buy, sell, or hold for whatever their submission is. Just a reminder to some of you, I had to rewrite some of the submissions because they were asked in question form, literally just a question. That's more of a mailbag thing. So it's more of a, here's the statement. Do you buy it? Do you sell it? Or you hold? It's not, will they do this on Saturday? That's a question. You're submitting the situation or the outcome or the scenario or whatever the case may be. And then I will then respond with whether I buy it, sell it, or hold it. So that's kind of how that works. Most of them are still that way, but a couple of you looked at it a little bit differently. And so I had to rewrite it a little bit. Just want to remind you guys for the future, and this is not a Q&A. That will be on Friday for the mailbag. All right. So if you do want to get something proposed or want me to respond to it and you aren't able to get your question, you weren't able to get your question on the board and you still want it to get up, or you're not a board member and you wanted to get up, go ahead and throw a super chat up there, and we will respond to those. I do have a couple actually of those real fast. Let me get to real fast from Anthony Solomon. Thank you, Anthony. Thanks for the show, Bryan. You're most welcome. Iden Benami, I be getting me through jury duty in downtown Chicago. Come on. Oh, goodness gracious. I am sorry to hear that. I was on jury duty a couple years ago. It was a very interesting case, and I actually got nominated to be the foreman. I think I told you guys about that. And we had to decide and found a guy guilty, and had to basically knew he was going to get sent to jail. That was a very heavy feeling for sure, man. So I do not take that lightly, man. Appreciate you doing that. Nerd for life. Bryan, all I heard was OC uses motions to get mismatches. 1, is that not happening? 2, Riley not seeing it. 3, we're losing those matchups. It's more so 1 and 2. They're not doing it as much. They're just doing a lot of simple jet motions. We're not seeing quite as much of the motions being effective. The tight end motions are kind of giveaway-ish. We're not seeing as much of that stuff, in my opinion, that we need to see. A lot of the things they're doing are just look a little telegraphed, and there's just not as much creativity with what they're doing motion-wise. They're going to have to fix that and adjust that. And then there's instances where they're using it, and it's serving its purpose, and the quarterback's just not getting the ball. There are times they're not winning the matchups, but that honestly has not been my biggest concern. The receivers are not my biggest concern right now. They're not playing great by any stretch of the imagination, but they're like not even top 2 or 3 of the issues that I'm seeing with this offense. They're gonna have to figure that out. Beast in 88 with super chat. Thank you very much. And Nerd for Life, thank you for your super chat. Beast in 88. I've been to the 04 Purdue game, 08 Syracuse, and 22 Stanford games. So Indy hasn't been kind to me. Thanks for the therapy sessions all week, BD. Indy kills me. Hey man, so are those I'm curious to hear from you. Are those aren't the only games you've been to, right? You've been to other games? Because if those are the only games you've been to, we might need to stop blaming Notre Dame for all this and look at you, man, because there you go. I think that I kind of put the blame on myself. I was not drinking pop for a while. I started drinking pop, and all of a sudden Deuce Knight's looking around, and all of a sudden Notre Dame's not playing well. So I'm just saying, man, maybe it's us. Maybe it's us. I say jokingly, but no, it is frustrating, man. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes it's therapy for me too. I'll be straight with, okay, he's been to another 7 games beside. Okay, cool. So you've been to some others that they've won, so it's not you. I won't blame you. I'll just blame myself. But honestly, there's the first, yesterday was definitely a therapy session. I was not going to jump in the post-game show on Saturday night, but then I just could not do it. And Sunday night was a good therapy session for me. Yesterday was a good therapy session. Today, I just didn't want to do the show, to be completely honest with you. I mean, I just was at the point now where it's like, I'm so done talking about this game that was played. I don't even have excitement for the game coming up because you just don't know what to expect from this football team. And you're just so disgusted with another year of what could have been and what should have been. Now, there's still tons of time to get things right. Tons of time to get things right. But it's frustrating. So I get it. But once you get going into the show, I'm glad I did it and all that type of stuff. But yeah, I'm with you, man. It can be frustrating. It can be very frustrating. So let's get to the buy, sell, hold. We're going to start off with ND Tommy. It says buy, sell, or hold. Notre Dame leans on fundamentals, blocking, tackling, running, love, price, and kicking game. Somehow, Steve Angeli gets his shot and leads the Irish to a come-from-behind 21-17 victory. Well, I'm going to sell that. And I'm not going to sell that because I don't think Steve Angeli can lead them to a 21-17 victory. And what I'm selling is if they lean on fundamentals, blocking, tackling, and running love and price, they should not need a 21-17 come from behind victory. It should not be that close. So I could see them leaning on fundamentals, blocking, tackling, running love and price. I could see Steve Angeli getting his shot if Riley Leonard's injured. But if those things all happen at the beginning of that, before the Angeli part, and they need a come from behind victory, it means Angeli played really poorly. And I don't know that that's necessarily what I would see happening against this secondary. But I just don't know that the first one and the second one go together. If the first one happens and they play well, then I don't think it'll be a come from behind victory, if that makes sense. So that's why I'm selling that one. But the first part of it, I would buy. that they're going to lean on fundamentals, blocking, tackling, running, love, and price, and kicking game. Yes, I absolutely see that. That's another thing we haven't talked about. I really hope that what happened Saturday has not gotten into Mitch Jeter's head, because he had two missed kicks. I think they were both blocked. And he's been a money kicker, and sometimes things like that can really get in a guy's head, and I hope that doesn't happen to him. I am Tenzin. Notre Dame bounces back. Buy, so hold. Notre Dame bounces back in a big way against Purdue, but will underestimate their second MAC team next game and struggle again. I'll say this. Listen, if they bounce back against Purdue, I have no concern at all about Miami of Ohio. That's kind of where I'm at. I just, after losing to Northern Illinois, I don't see how this team, so I'm selling this. I don't see how this team goes out the next week. Let's say they, like, to your buy, so hold, they come out this week and they bounce back in a big way. There's no way in heck, in my opinion, this team is that immature that they're going to then go out and say, well, okay, we're good now because we bounced back against Purdue, so we can now go take on a MAC team that was even better than Northern Illinois, and we're going to be fine. If this happens, so I'm selling this, but if your submission comes true and my sell is wrong and it should have been a buy, this is going to be a long year, because that tells me this is an incredibly immature football team. I don't think they're that immature. I think if they bounce back against Purdue, they will also be really good against Miami of Ohio. I do. I don't see how they bounce back against one and then go back to what they were 2 weeks ago. Games like Northern Illinois change you. Now, what we don't know is how it changes you. Does it change you to where now you're just a shook football team that never recovers? Or does it shake you because, from the standpoint of, you're now a pissed off football team and you're going to stay that way? Because that's really what it comes down to for me. And if it doesn't change you and you immediately go back to what you were, then you're an immature football team with crap leadership. That's not a very poor leadership. That's how I see it. It would shock me if that's what happens. I could see them struggling against Miami of Ohio, but I think if they struggle against Miami of Ohio, most likely they also struggle against Purdue. That's how I see it. KJ Fergie, buy, sell, hold. Freeman and staff will eventually learn to use creative ways to use their best playmakers on offense and stop rotating out our best players at critical moments in the game. Well, look, there's certain instances I'm okay with them rotating certain guys out. You know, if you've got playmakers at certain spots and you need to get a pass pro guy in there, I understand that, but maybe go like 21 in that situation, or, you know, different types of things. It's not so much that, but then they take him off the field and then they give the other guys the ball. You know what I mean? If you want to put Devin Ford in the game, fine, but you can't have Devin Ford in the game and Jeremiah Love in the game. Like that was kind of my concern and what I didn't quite understand about some of those final drives and why they didn't get those guys the football. It just it was puzzling. So to a degree, I don't necessarily agree with the premise entirely, although we saw enough of that for it to be viewed as a problem. Will they eventually learn to use? Sure, they'll eventually learn it. So I'll buy it to eventually learn it. I don't know that it's going to be this weekend, but I think they'll eventually figure it out, or they'll be fired. And that's really what it comes down to. Brian Kelly's family, Notre Dame, buy, so hold. Notre Dame's offensive line and defensive lines control the line of scrimmage and run and pass versus Purdue. I'm going to sell that just because I haven't seen this offensive or defensive line control much of anything so far with any kind of consistency. They've had their moments, especially the D-line against A&M. They were good. They weren't great. They were good. But they got whooped in the trenches on both sides of the ball by Northern Illinois. And I think Purdue's probably as good, if not better, than Northern Illinois on the defensive line. And not as experienced, but more talented than what Northern Illinois was in the offensive line. So I'm going to sell that. And now, is it possible they do this? Of course. But in a lot of different areas, I am 100% in show me mode. Do I think Riley Leonard can still be a dynamic impact quarterback? Absolutely. Am I predicting it? Not until he shows it to me. I mean, I got to see it, right? Because he's not wearing a Duke uniform anymore. He's wearing a Notre Dame uniform. He's got to show me he can do it at Notre Dame. You know, Mike Demrock's going to show me that he can get this thing fixed. Al Golden's got to show me he can find some fixes in the run game. I'm less concerned about that one. But everything. Riley Mills, Howard Cross. Everybody's got to show me now. Outside of Xavier Watts and Jeremiah Love, I mean, everybody's got something to show me. And so it's possible, but I'm not predicting it until they show it to me with some level of consistency. AFMOS. I'd be very curious to know what that means. So if you could put that either in the chat or if you're not listening live, if you could put that on the message board, I'd be very curious to know what that means. CJ, buy, sell, hold. CJ and Kenny don't see any meaningful minutes playing time for the remainder of the 24 season. Perhaps Kenny gets in for a couple of minutes to hand off and pass once or twice when we are up 3 scores in the fourth quarter, late in the fourth quarter. Sadly, I'm buying this. And I don't like the fact that it's a buy, but barring injury, I don't think that we're going to see CJ Carr or Kenny Minchey in any meaningful snaps. I don't. Explain this to me. How do I predict? How do I say otherwise? For a head coach who is so incredibly petrified of making a mistake that he goes out and gets a quarterback like Riley Leonard, then says, let's reprogram Riley Leonard and put him in this offense and not have him do this, not have him do that. Don't be a playmaker. Don't be spectacular. Just do exactly what we tell you to do. That coach is then going to go put 2 unproven players in the game. I mean, I watched CJ Carr be the best quarterback on the field in the Jersey scrimmage, and I watched CJ Carr be the best quarterback on the field in the blue gold game, and I watched CJ Carr throw the ball better than anybody else on the roster, and then I got to watch CJ Carr remain as the number 4 quarterback in the depth chart. Why? Here's a direct quote. Well, they got to do it against somebody better than the third team. Well, you can't do it against somebody better than the third team if you don't get snaps against somebody better than the third team. So and somebody says, I think that was just word salad right before kickoff. Don't think that was a real thing. The problem with that premise is that's exactly how the game played out, and that's the similar comment that Marcus Freeman has made over and over again. So you can convince yourself that was just a word salad, but that's exactly how the game played out. It's exactly how the game played out. Because they're not creating things that give – their protections are not designed to create running lanes for a quarterback that's mobile. They are set for a quarterback to sit in the pocket. And that doesn't make any sense. So I think that's just kind of coping, honestly, that there's no way it can be that bad. There's no way they can be that dumb. And I understand that. But that's what we've seen, unfortunately. Because even the running that Riley Leonard has done, it's all been it's all within the structure of the offense, primarily. Like he's had, one scramble that was effective against A&M? Everything else he's done as a runner, as an impact guy, has been on designed runs. So that's running the offense. So I just don't see how that guy turns the reins over to CJ Carr or Kenny Minchey. I hope I'm wrong. Really hope I'm wrong. If Riley Leonard can't go, I hope that eventually one of those 2 guys plays quarterback. But I don't see that being the case. I think they're just going to put Steve Angeli in at that point in time and hand the ball off and take the occasional one-on-one shot and throw a bunch of checkdowns and easy throws. And I mean, he had a deep ball to a wide open receiver. It's a good read. Found a guy, hit him. And 1 shot outside, and everything else they had with him was hitches, crossers, checkdowns, right? It's a very conservative game plan, which I understand, right? It's exactly what I understand. And so with a redshirt freshman making his first start, but that's just kind of what they are doing now. They're not taking shots down the field. They're not doing things. They're not giving their – and understand what I'm saying here, what Freeman's doing. It's programming, y'all. I don't know how many times I can say this. I've explained. It's not Marcus Freeman in Mike Denbrock's ears saying, hey, call this, call that, do this, do that. It's not him saying, hey, Mike, we're going to go out there and run the ball all day. It's programming. It's mental programming, right? I mean, look, guys, we're a country that has perfected that, right? I mean, I'm not going to get into conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's been open. It's been admitted. But there's some programs the CIA did. I don't even want to say them because it might get me demonetized. Back in the 50s and 60s about mind control. Mental programming is a part of sports. And when you have programmed a kid to don't make mistakes, do exactly what we say, do exactly what we say, do exactly what we say, guess what? Eventually he's going to be like, yeah, I'm not quite sure what I should do, or normally I would run, but am I supposed to do that now? And the freelancing thing that is there is gone. And what we get into now is this guy that is afraid to make a mistake. Riley Leonard was not that kind of quarterback at Duke. Why is he now? Okay, that's the thing we got to ask ourselves. Why is a guy that was a freelance, go make plays, kind of street ball type of quarterback the last 2 years now, and this is before he hurt his shoulder and all, why is that there now? That's what you have to ask yourselves. And so that was an issue under Brian Kelly. I criticized Brian Kelly for it because he had a similar philosophy. And just because I like Marcus Freeman a lot as a person and do think he's got a lot of tools to be successful, I'm not going to give him a pass when we're seeing the exact same thing. And it's not like a young guy that came up that maybe we just misevaluated him. We're talking about a guy that went out and made those type of freelance plays to beat Duke last year, almost beat Notre Dame with those last year. And there's all those different aspects of it. And now he can't do that against Northern Illinois. I don't buy that. And so when it's kind of like this, when someone tells you who they are, believe them until they give you a reason not to. And, you have the guy in Sam Hartman that throws for 38 to 4,000 yards a year, comes to Notre Dame and is 1,000 yards under what he'd been doing in previous years. Why? Think about this. Who's the one quarterback in the last 3 years that you would argue they got the most out of his talent? It's Drew Pine. Why? Because Drew Pine is exactly that type of quarterback. Just do what we tell you to do. And that's why Drew Pine probably went on the most successful run as a starting quarterback that we've seen, as far as beating good teams and consistency and that type of stuff outside of Stanford. I mean, think about that. Why is that? Why is Drew Pine the guy that probably ran your offense the best in the last 2 years? Not Sam Hartman, not Riley Leonard, because he is exactly what you want. He is a robot. And, you can't say, well, look, we'll have him be this, but then we'll also take the playmaking. No, it doesn't work that way. You've got to accept some of the other stuff and then hand them with the playmaking. Ian Book never played for Marcus Freeman. We're talking about Marcus Freeman. So that's kind of where I'm going at it. So, and just a response, I know that stuff is declassified, but there's a lot of things that are known that YouTube still demonetizes you for. There's a lot of things that are now admitted as truth from, 4 years ago, that if you talk about it now, you still get demonetized. So just because it's declassified doesn't mean that I'm not going to get dinged because I mentioned it on this podcast. So that's why I'm not going to say it, because I don't know what they will or won't hammer me for and stop, promoting us and that kind of stuff. So just letting you guys know that a little bit. That's why I don't want to say it. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm at. So that's why I'm a sell on that. Now, here's the thing. Everything I just said, I hope that I am proven dead wrong starting this weekend. Dead wrong. I would love to be wrong about this. Would love to be wrong about this. And I hope that eventually they either A, change, or B, we find out that maybe there's a little bit more at play here than we think. This is ultimately what they want to get to, and then they eventually get to that. That's also, we also have to be open-minded enough to say maybe there's a reason why they're holding back right now. Maybe there was an injury we didn't know about. I'm not talking about Riley getting hurt in the game. I'm talking about maybe some other things. Maybe there's something that's been happening. Maybe there's something going on that we don't know about, and we have to be willing to admit that as a possibility, that eventually they want to get there. That also is possible, right? But again, we just saw Notre Dame lose to Northern Illinois, folks. I can't think of a single scenario in which this is true. You should have had any four of your starting quarterbacks be able to beat Northern Illinois, and it didn't happen, right? Like that's kind of where the disappointment lies. I don't know. Watch that. I don't know what that is. Was it Lilo Galante? I don't know what that is. So send me a link or something. I'm not sure what that is. I watch a lot of true crime stuff and everything like that. So I don't know what that is. DCLTJ. By so hold, Sean Sevillano will work his way into the D-line rotation in time to be a consideration for the freshman All-American team after shoring up the run defense. Man, I'd love it if this was a buy. I would say if this happens with Armel Mukum or Sean Sevillano or somebody like that, that'd be great. Would be great. I would love that. I don't know that that'll happen, but I would love that. They need to have look. I'm a fan of having some beef up the middle. I just don't think it's the only way to be successful. What I do believe is if you're not going to have beef up the middle, you need to play to that. If you're going to be a quote unquote undersized, you need to play to that. And so hopefully, I would actually hope that it would actually be Armel Mukum because I think he's more of a disruptor. I think Sean Sevillano is just more of a space eater, which is fine. But I want to see that be the case. We do have a buy so hold AST 12321 super chat. Thank you very much. Buy so hold. Steve Angeli will start every game next season. I'm selling that just for my sanity. But no, I don't think that's the case. Based on things that I've been told, I don't think that'll be the case. But at this point in time, anything is possible. But I'm gonna sell that. Unless I'm just being lied to, which is, I guess, possible, I'm gonna sell that. Aiden Benami, buy so hold. Football and any sport for that matter is a game of knowledge, but also feel and gut. You hope Marcus Freeman goes with those and not some Anthony kid. Like, look, let's stop blaming Anthony Tresh for this, right? Because Anthony Tresh is just doing his job. The issue is not him. The issue is the position that Marcus Freeman put him in. And so, yes, football is knowledge. It's about feel and it's about gut. But your feeling and your gut needs to be driven by data and experience. Right? Like that's the thing is like gut isn't just like, okay, in my head, I just feel like we should call this play that we've never practiced or never run. No, it's in my gut. This is what works for us. And in this situation, man, I just feel like this is what they're going to do. I think they're going to run this particular play in this situation. Why? Not because of my gut, just randomly, and I never saw anything. I've never watched any film, but my gut tells me this. No, my preparation leads me to believe that this is what they're going to do. You've got a knowledge of your football team and the situations and all that kind of stuff. So, I look at it and say, yeah, I want him to go more with feel and gut based on knowledge and breaking down the opponent. There is a time and a place for data. There is a time and a place for, and that's always been true. Every coach in America that I've ever known, certainly everyone that I've ever coached with, has on his play sheet a go for two chart. And that's kind of analytics, like, hey, when you're up this amount, you go for it, right? I mean, those are all things. There's nothing wrong with analytics. Analytics is a good thing, but if it's used properly. Analytics could have helped baseball if used properly. The problem is baseball dove too hard into analytics and, in my opinion, ruined the game. And I hope that football doesn't do that. In basketball, analytics, in my opinion, in a lot of ways, has ruined the game. And it's just not it was starting to be fun again as they shot more threes, and now they've kind of leaned too hard into that. And you can't have a 7-footer. And I literally have seen this. Well, this guy's 7 foot, but I don't know if they're going to, he's going to get drafted, this, that, and the other, because he doesn't shoot well enough. And I'm thinking, what the heck? He's 7 feet tall. Whatever happened to rebounding and defense and blocking shots? Well, that's not as valued as it used to be. Okay, that's fine. But I think that's kind of ruined the game. And I hope football doesn't fall into that same trap. And I mean, there's a time and a place for analytics. And when that time is right, then lean on that kid. But like what happened Saturday is not his fault. It's on Coach Freeman. He's the one that gives people the ability to speak to him in those type of situations or asks. He turned around and asked the kid. From what I saw. So that's not on Anthony. That's on the head football coach. Buy so hold. We've had our QB hurt over 75% of the time over the last 10 to 15 years or so. You mentioned this summer. Over 75%? No, I sell that. Yeah, I sell that. Yeah, I'm trying. No, over 70. No, not that I can think of. And you had years where like you had a quarterback hurt for a long time. Maybe that 75, I still think is too high. But we'll have to see. All right. Got more from Aiden Benami. Buy so hold. Marcus Freeman will learn from not taking an opponent seriously. And unfortunate as it is, he will be better for this. I'm going to buy it out of hope. But Shouldn't we have learned that lesson against Marshall or Stanford or Navy 2022 or Clemson last year? I mean, did we really need to learn that lesson against Northern Illinois? I don't think so. So I'm going to buy it out of hope. I hope that this is the thing that finally gets them to realize, hey, we have to have more consistency from a preparation standpoint, physically and mentally. Louisville, Joe Allen said Louisville and Clemson. I agree with you about Clemson. I don't agree about Louisville. I don't think Notre Dame overlooked Louisville. I just think that team was beat mentally going into that game. I don't think it was that they necessarily overlooked them as much. You could argue that maybe they overlooked Duke a little bit, but I don't think Louisville is a team that they overlooked. I could be wrong, but that was just my read of that situation. All right. Yeah, I think there was a preparation problem against Louisville. There was a mental focus problem. I don't think it was a not taking them seriously. So they played terrible. I just think they played terrible for different reasons. That's all I'm saying. Bison holds Steve Angeli will lead Notre Dame to an 11-1 regular season due to a Riley Leonard injury. Sell. I think Steve Angeli is a fine quarterback. He's a fine, he's a better version he's better than Drew Pine. He's got better skills than Drew Pine. But if let's just say, because we're assuming now we're talking about that, if he takes over for this weekend's game, no, I don't think that they go 11-1 the rest of the way. 10-2, maybe 9-3, maybe. I'd say maybe 10-2 would be more likely, because one of the games they would have lost with him at quarterback, like they wouldn't have beat Texas A&M without Riley Leonard. And I don't think people are putting enough on for all the issues you have with Riley Leonard. Riley Leonard has bailed the offensive line out of at least 4 or 5 sacks so far this year. Steve Angeli will not do that, and that's not neither will Kenny Minchie, neither will CJ Carr. That's no. Steve's a nice kid. You can go 10-2 with Steve Angeli if you want to compete for a championship and run the table the rest of the way. I don't know that he can do that. Guys, I would truly love to be wrong. I know some of you get so upset whenever I don't say Steve Angeli's the next Joe Montana. I get that. I hope I'm wrong about Steve Angeli, but I've got to give you my honest opinion, right? Do you guys want me to lie to you, or do you want me to give you my honest opinion? I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm as wrong on Steve Angeli as I was about Kyron Williams. I do. But I just haven't seen it. I didn't see it. I mean, if you really study the bowl game like a coach, you'd see things my way. I'm confident of that. If you saw practices that we saw, you'd feel the same way that I do. I truly believe that. He's a nice quarterback. And I've said in the past, I could see a scenario in a couple of years where CJ Carr, Steve Angeli, and Kenny Minchie are all Power 5 starting quarterbacks, just at different schools. I think Steve Angeli is a fine Power 5, Power 4 quarterback, just not at a place like Notre Dame that's trying to win championships. He just isn't. But I'll tell you, if Steve proves me wrong over the long haul, not plays well in a game or two, but if he proves me wrong, I would love that. And I will come here and admit that I was wrong with a smile on my face, because I think he's a great kid. I've heard nothing but great things about him as a leader and as a teammate and as a worker. All those things are true. I don't see it with him with the skill set. I didn't see it in high school, and I haven't seen it now. Right? And I'm not going on. It's not just about practice, though. Some people say he's a gamer. Okay, fine. But even in games, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. The stuff we see in practice is what we see in games. And that's kind of where I'm at. And Tony Gilbert, I hope you're right. I truly do. And any Notre Dame kid that plays that I don't think is very good, I always want him to prove me wrong. Because Notre Dame being good is far more important to me than me being right. I hate being right when I don't think a kid can play, because it means it's not good for Notre Dame. So that's truth, absolute truth. Ida Benami, can Texas State beat Arizona State Thursday night? Bro, I just watched Northern Illinois beat Notre Dame. So anything is possible. Anything is possible. I can't tell you the answer to that question, because I know Texas State's looked pretty good in their first 2 games. They played UTSA. I think they blew UTSA out last weekend. They lost a lot this offseason. They lost a lot of talent this offseason. Can they go out and is GJ Kinney is he the head coach at Texas State, right? I know they got the James Madison quarterback this offseason. So, I mean, they got some – I just haven't watched them play. So I couldn't tell you for sure what they can or can't do. But I do know statistically they look pretty darn good the first 2 games. And, I don't know what Arizona State did. We'll see what the Sun Devils do. They beat Mississippi State. That's a good win for them. They blew out Wyoming and beat Mississippi State. They got to go to Texas State. I don't know why the heck they would schedule that game. Can they? Sure, I'll buy that. They can. Just as long as you guys understand, I haven't watched any film of Texas State this year. So just keep that in mind. All right. Vice hold. The Gamecocks will beat LSU this weekend. Sell. Look, can they? Again, I just watched Northern Illinois beat Notre Dame. Can they? I watched LSU in Brian Kelly's first year get whooped on the road by a 5-6, 4-7 Texas A&M team. Sure, it can happen. I'm not going to predict that it's going to happen. Although I'll tell you what, I would have told you the same thing going into last week, and I would have told you absolutely no way is South Carolina going to go on the road and beat Kentucky. No freaking way is that going to happen. I'd have been like, dude, you're seriously predicting Iden for South Carolina to beat Kentucky on the road? Did you not watch South Carolina barely beat Old Dominion? Did you not see that? And that's what I would have said. But you know what happened? South Carolina went out this weekend and not only beat Kentucky, beat the crap out of Kentucky. Beat the absolute crap out of Kentucky. I don't think Kentucky got to 100 yards passing. I'm actually going to look that box score up again. They didn't get to 100 yards passing. They had 44 yards passing and only 139 yards rushing. Like, that is not good. That is just downright terrible. The problem that I see it is, though, they won 31-6, but that was more about, I thought Kentucky played really poorly, but they had some short fields. I mean, their last touchdown was a pick six. They had a 58-yard touchdown drive, a nice 61-yard touchdown drive, a 43-yard touchdown drive because of turnovers and short fields. LSU's defense isn't very good, but LSU's offense is still good. And I have a hard time seeing South Carolina, even at home, winning that game. I'll be rooting for them, but I just don't see it. I think LSU will win that game. And again, that's another one that I hope to be wrong about. Would love to be wrong about that. But yeah, I mean, but right now, with the way the season's gone, man, I don't put anything past anybody. If you'd have told me last Wednesday, if you'd have come into Bicel Hold and you'd have said, hey, Bicel Hold, Northern Illinois is going to beat Notre Dame in the trenches and win that game, I'd have been like, dude, what are you on? You are nuts. Yes, this is a good football team, and I know I told you that this is a well-coached team, and there's no way they're going to come into Notre Dame Stadium and manhandle Notre Dame in the trenches. No way. And now you're picking Kentucky or South Carolina to beat Kentucky on the road? What are you talking about, dude? Where's your head at? And then you to come back on Monday and be like, hey, Bryan, remember when you told me I was nuts for those 2 things last week? Well, they came true. So when those things are happening, man, I'm not putting anything past anything right now at this point in time. I said this is going to be a crazy year. It's certainly been that so far. It has certainly been that so far. Because that's exactly what both of those things would happen this weekend, man. And so we'll see. I hope it's true, but I don't know. Dano, Bicel Hold, Notre Dame will have to have a run-heavy game plan versus Purdue. That would concern me a little bit. Yeah. I don't know that Notre Dame can come out and run all over Purdue. I hope I'm wrong, but I just don't see that. I think they're going to have to be balanced, and they're going to have to find ways to throw the football. Going to absolutely have to find ways to throw the football. So I hope you're correct. 13 Reasons Why says that, Bicel Hold, Texas overtakes Georgia as number 1 after this weekend. So Texas plays UTSA and Georgia plays at Kentucky. A week ago at this time, I would have said that's possible. I could see Georgia kind of overlooking Kentucky to, kind of get ready for that next game against Alabama here in 2 weeks. But the way Kentucky played last week, even if Georgia overlooks Kentucky, I don't know how, they're going to overcome them. So no, I think Georgia getting a road win over Kentucky is going to mean more than Texas A&M, Texas getting a home win over UTSA. So I'm going to say no, that they do not take them over number 1. Somebody just said, talking about an upset, Michigan getting upset this weekend. I don't see it. I don't see that as an upset. Wasn't Texas favored to win that? Texas was ranked higher and favored to win. So there was nothing about Michigan losing as an upset. They were the underdog. And there was the final score is 31-12. I predicted 30-13. That's pretty much how that game. I wish the Notre Dame game would have gone how I predicted it, but that one pretty much went how I thought it was going to go. Greg Nielsen, if Josh Burnham has to miss time due to an injury, Junior Tuamaka can give Notre Dame effective reps at the defensive end position. I think he can. I don't know that he'd be the answer there because he plays Viper right now, and it would require a move. If Josh Burnham can't play, though, they're going to have to figure something out, and I think Junior might be a good option because, man, I don't see how that one happens. I don't see how that one happens because, I don't see it. I mean, you just can't go to the game saying, hey, we're just going to give all the Burnham's reps to RJ Open because he hasn't played well enough to do that. Maybe this is a weekend to give Bryce Young more reps, maybe. So that's kind of where I'm at. So yeah, I don't think that's going to be. I don't think that's going to be something that I see. Yeah. So Chief Brody says, Bryan, I'm talking about Michigan losing this coming weekend, not the game. I gotcha. I don't see that happening. I mean, Arkansas State, I would love to see it, but Arkansas State barely beat Central Arkansas and barely beat Tulsa. I don't see that happening, but I would love it if it did. Absolutely love it if it did. So, but I'd sell that one too. So I'm going to sell this one as, or I'm going to buy this that he can give them effective reps, but I just don't know that he will. Richard III, buys a hold. If this team misses the playoffs, Coach Freeman will be able to retain most of the current roster, i.e. not lose important players to the portal. Yeah, I would imagine. I don't see a bunch. I mean, look, here's the thing about players and recruits, and I've said this 1,000 times, they do not jump ship the way that fans do or react the way that fans do after wins or losses, and that's a good thing. They're not fanatics. Most of these kids didn't grow up Notre Dame fans. Most of the coaches didn't grow up Notre Dame fans, and that's perfectly okay. That's why recruits don't decommit after every loss, even though fans think that they will. Notre Dame's recruits handled the loss a lot better than a lot of members of Irish Breakdown who, before the game was even over, were canceling their membership as if like this is somehow my fault that Notre Dame played the way they did this weekend, or somehow I should have seen that Notre Dame was going to come lay an egg against Northern Illinois, and so you're going to cancel your membership because you're mad at the team or mad at me or whatever. The same 18 to 21-year-olds that you're booing are going to handle the loss way better than you will, and they're not going to jump in the portal and leave and all those type of things. So usually they don't react that way. Now, if they go out, if the season goes out and you get into a situation where the season falls apart, then I could see that but it wouldn't be because they missed the playoff. It would be because the season fell apart and the program's in a little bit in shambles. But just missing the play, if they go 10-2 this year and miss the playoff, you're not going to see guys leave because of that. You'll see same guys leave that would have left otherwise. So if they lose some players in the portal, it won't be because of that. It'll be because they got big offers or because they're not playing. That would be why. Bayside Tiger 6 buys a hold. Marcus Freeman has to trust the version of himself that got him here versus trying to be like Tressel, other coaches. Yeah, see, I'm selling that because it's we always said, oh, he's playing Tressel ball. Well, I mean, Tressel ball worked. It worked for Ohio State. I mean, the guy won a national title, played for the national title another year, was consistently in the top 10. I don't remember Jim Tressel losing to a MAC team, right? So, I mean, if he was playing Tressel ball, Notre Dame would have won on Saturday. This isn't about that. And just because Jim Tressel's a mentor, hey, guys, if I was the head coach at Notre Dame, I'd have Jim Tressel come speak to my football team as well. He's a Midwestern legend with what? I mean, if Jim Tressel's speaking to your football team, he's going to be able to hold up his four fingers like this and have national championships on each finger and say, guess what? I don't have enough room for all my championship rings. Let me have to bring up this other finger. Guy won 5 national championships, 4 at the 1AA level. He won 4 in 8 years. 7 years, excuse me. And lost the championship game 2 other times, goes to Ohio State, wins the national title in 2002, beats one of a great Miami team. And from 2002 to 2010, before he got fired, finished inside the top 10 all but one season. I mean, the guy was a great coach. If he was my mentor, I would absolutely have him come speak to my football team. I would have Lou Holtz come speak to my football team. It's good to have mentors. It's good to take lessons from your mentors. And so I think that we've pushed back too hard on this. However, the lessons you learn have to build you into being who you are. And so when you make decisions, you don't ask yourself, what would Jim have done? What would Lou have done? What would Jesus do on this particular play? It's, okay, this is what I think is best for my football team. It's like, you'll see this all the time, especially at the lower levels, but you'll go to these camps, or I'll go to these clinics when I was coaching, and I'd sit there with like other coaches that I coached, in our league, and we'd be listening to this offensive coach talk, and I'd get some things from it. And I said, okay, well, I like that concept. How do we fit that into our personnel? Okay, they run a 20-yard corner route. We can't run a 20-yard corner route because we can't protect that long. Our receivers run 4.7s, not 4.4s, and our quarterback can't make that throw. Okay, so fine. So we'll run it this way. And you've got to alter it that way. You've always got to build it to what you do. And I don't think Marcus Freeman is doing certain things because that's how Jim Tressel did it. I think Marcus Freeman has a philosophy of football that is similar to what Jim Tressel did. The problem is there's not enough conviction to lean into that. If you want to be Jim Tressel, then you need to lean into that. And what frustrates me is you hire coaches to run a certain type of thing, you recruit players to run a certain type of thing, and then you program them mentally to be so afraid to make a mistake that they can't play that system. And that's a bigger issue for me. But at the same time, your offensive coordinator also has to do a better job, just like your defense needs to do a better job. So I'm totally fine with Marcus Freeman looking up to Jim Tressel. I would if I was him and played for him. The Tressel ball thing, they don't play anything like Ohio State did on offense in the 2000s. It has nothing to do with that. And there's other teams that win running the football. There needs to be other answers for this, not just the oh, well, he's trying to be like Tressel. Well, I wish he was like Tressel, because if he was like Tressel, Notre Dame would never lose to MAC teams. They would have a national championship already. And, because Jim Tressel won a title in year 2, and they'd be a top 10 team every single year. This is exactly what Jim Tressel did. So, it's an easy way to take a shot at Freeman. And that's fine, but that's not the problem. The problem isn't that he's trying to be like Jim Tressel. The problem is that if he's going to be like that, you've got to go in other ways. His issue has more to do with him being a defensive coordinator than him looking up to Jim Tressel. That's the problem. I don't think the way he runs the offense or the way he programs players to never make mistakes is because of what Jim Tressel did. It's because he's a defensive guy, and that's what defensive guys like to do. Don't make a mistake, offense. Don't screw up, offense. Don't put us in a short field, offense. Don't turn the ball over, offense. Take a longer time on this drive, offense. We need time to talk, offense. That's where it comes from. It comes from him being a really, really good middle linebacker in college and a really good defensive coordinator. I think it has more to do with that than him looking up to Jim Tressel or looking up to Lou Holtz or any of those other things. Those are things that Coach Freeman's going to have to adapt on, not so much, hey, stop listening to a guy that has 5 national championships. Stop listening to a guy whose team all but 1 year down the last, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in a 10-year stretch at Ohio State, right? Say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in a 9-year stretch at Ohio State, won a national title, finished in the top 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 other times, and finished in the top 10 one other time. Only had one finish outside the top 10, and that was a year where they went 8-4. Like, I would gladly take that because you've already got the 8-4 out of the way. I would gladly take that. Okay, be like Jim Tressel, because that means you're going to win a championship. And remember, when Jim Tressel won his national title in 2002, it had been over 30 years since Ohio State won a national championship. So he didn't inherit a team that was winning championships all the time like Urban Meyer did. He inherited a program that was getting their butts kicked consistently by Michigan and hadn't won a national championship in over 30 years. Over 30 years. Well, Tressel never played in the playoffs either, though. 4 of Jim Tressel's national titles literally came in a 16-team playoff. Right? I mean, dude. Yeah, Jim Tressel knew what a playoff was like. I mean, guys, he beat a Miami team that some people think is one of the greatest teams ever. He won 4 championships in a playoff. Yeah, Jim Tressel knows how to win in a playoff. That's literally what his entire career was built on leading up to Ohio State. Go and look at his resume. NCAA Division 1A first round, NCAA Division 1AA second round, first round, 1AA championship in a game, the year they had to play 15 games. You want to ask, hey, Coach Tressel, how do you prepare a team to play a 15, 16-game season? He's going to have a lot more knowledge about that than any other coach is out there. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's not harder on Marcus Freeman now. It's not even at all harder. Jim Tressel knows what it's like to have to win 4 or 5 playoff games to win a national championship. He absolutely knows what that's like. Absolutely knows what that's like. They had to win a national championship when he was coaching. You had to win 4 games. And here's something else, because I coached in the playoffs. You don't get time at that level. You don't get a month to prepare for that game. It's the next weekend. So he absolutely knows what it's like to win at that level. He absolutely is someone you should look up to. Absolutely he's someone he should look up to. And what's going on with Marcus Freeman now is not because he has Jim Tressel as a mentor. That is a lazy social media take. His problems are because he's a defensive coordinator that tries to run his entire program like he's running a defense and doesn't understand in today's game, you have to let the offense eat a little bit. That's the problem. You have to be willing to allow some mistakes in order to be successful and to be the kind of elite offense you need to be. That's the issue. That's not because anything related to Jim Tressel. It's because of him being a defensive coordinator. And, just there's nothing I dislike more than just like those takes that everybody jumps onto. And I'm not talking about Bayside Tiger as much as just some of the other responses. Well, everyone on Twitter's jumping on to this is the problem, so let me jump on and say this is the problem so that we can all be saying the same thing. So Marcus Freeman should absolutely take advice from guys like Jim Tressel who have been there and done that. They've had tough seasons. They've had tough losses. They've had times when they lost a quarterback got hurt, done all that. Of course they should lean on that. Should he not talk to Lou Holtz? Should he not take advice from Lou Holtz, which he does? Of course he does. That's the issue. And that's what he's got to fix. And as I've said before in response to, I'm not saying I've said this, I don't know how many more times I can say this. He's not on his headset telling Mike Denbrock what to run. It's an overall attitude. It's a demeanor. It's how you prepare. It's don't mess up, don't mess up, don't mess up, don't mess up that can get in your quarterback's head, can get in your receivers' heads. It makes guys more methodical. You're asking them to do more things than they should be doing, then they don't do it fast. There's all types of things that go in here beyond just the easy of, hey, run this here, run that there. That's not what I'm talking about. I've never said that he's doing that. Matter of fact, he doesn't do that from anything I've ever been told outside of the normal situations that you always talk to your head coach. It's 4th down. Hey, what are we doing here? Or 3rd down? Are we playing for a field goal here? Can I take a shot in the end zone? Head coaches always do that kind of stuff. Always. So that's kind of where it comes from. It's that part of how you prepare your team on a day-to-day basis. Domer Grizz, buy, sell, hold. I know you said 21 personnel could help, but buy, sell, hold, playing more 12 personnel would be an effective way to get the offense rolling. Sell that. No, look, could you use 12 personnel? Sure. Would I use it a little bit more than they're doing now? Yes, but I'm taking your question to that kind of becomes more of one of their prominent things, and that I don't buy. No. I still think your number 3 receiver is probably better than what your number 2 tight end is playing right now. So I would sell that. Somebody just said he did say to run the ball in the end of the second quarter before the field goal try. I literally just said that, though. I said outside of the normal situations, 3rd down, playing for a field goal, that's true for everybody. In those situations, those moments where it's late in a half, late in a quarter, time's running down, of course your head coach is going to have a say in those things. That's always true. I literally said that. And that's one of those times, hey, we just got the ball midfield. Hey, coach, can we take a shot here? That happens if no matter who your OC is and who your head coach is. Those conversations always happen. That's not meddling in the offense. That's communication between a head coach and an offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator. It always happens. Happens at the NFL level, happens at the college level, happens everywhere. That's not what I'm talking about. That's normal. just for, I think I left out a word, but just for fun is what I think that was supposed to be. Buy, sell, hold. Marcus Freeman will eventually be a top 10 coach in college football, just not at Notre Dame. I'm going to sell that just because I want to be optimistic. Joe Allen, 72, buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame moving from hamstring injuries to labrum injuries. Leonard and Benjamin Morrison is going to be the next criticism of the strength and conditioning program that people will fixate on. You're probably right. I mean, look, 2 injuries like that don't create a problem, just like, a couple hamstring injuries don't. What was the problem last year was it was happening everywhere. It was happening everywhere. Like and then a whole position group was ripped with that. And that was legitimate. Couple shoulder injuries doesn't create that, and I don't think you're saying that. But yeah, that's going to get a lot of people kind of fired up about, got to have somebody to blame, got to have a scapegoat. I'm much more upset that the strength coach apparently is the one that told the head coach to back off on the Thursday practice. And then he listened. 2 mistakes. Riker Ferg, buy, sell, hold. If Notre Dame struggles against Purdue and Miami of Ohio to a point where the program, if Notre Dame struggles against Purdue and Miami of Ohio to a point where the program under Marcus Freeman may not recover from. If they struggle, they'll recover from that. If they lose, that'll be tougher. If they lose either one of these next 2 games, I don't know that Marcus Freeman ever recovers from that. I don't care if they win ugly games. I mean, it'll bother me. I'll be critical of it, but you can recover from that. What you can't recover from are those losses. So I'll sell that. Buy, sell, hold. If Marcus Freeman doesn't embrace the rat poison mindset, we're in trouble for the future of the program under Marcus Freeman. I would agree with that. I'll buy that. I absolutely buy that. I think that's a big reason. And Marcus Freeman even said this in the postgame, in the Monday press conference, which just blew my mind. He's talking about how guys, in the press clipping, and guess what? So is he. He's jumping on all these podcasts, and not any Notre Dame media podcasts, but national podcasts, and talking about this, and buying into the hype, and his players are doing that, and it's like, hey man, why did you not know that was going on the week before? Rat poison is the comment for those who, some people don't seem to know that. It's something that Nick Saban said about when people would tell his team how great it was, he would call it rat poison. Basically sounds good, but if you eat it, it'll kill you. Essentially, if you fall for it, it'll kill you. And Marcus Freeman needed to do a better job of making sure his team knew what was going on. And I mean, that's something that a guy like Jim Tressel would have done a better job with. It's something that Lou Holtz used to always kind of focus on. You got to prepare that. You got to handle that beforehand. You should have known that going in. It should have taken you 10 minutes of film session, which is all it took us to be like, this is a good veteran, well-coached football team. We're going to have to be ready for this football team. I mean, so your first meeting for game week should have been like, hey, fellas, here's the deal. And he didn't do that, apparently. Or if he did it, he didn't do it in a convincing way. Or you say it, you give him the words, but then you go out there and change your practice structure, which tells us, hey, we're not changing our practice structure if we were playing USC this weekend, if we were playing Louisville this weekend, or A&M this weekend. So makes me think that you don't take this team seriously. So yes, I would agree. I would buy that. He's going to have to find his groove in games like this to say, hey, listen, when we're playing these type of teams, because again, last year Notre Dame blew out a lot of opponents, but most of those opponents weren't good. I mean, you outside of NC State, who they pulled away from late. But if you look at the teams they beat last year, Navy wasn't very good. Tennessee State wasn't very good. Central Michigan wasn't very good. Pitt wasn't very good. Wake Forest wasn't very good. Stanford wasn't very good. The only decent team you really beat last year bad was where it just controlled them from start to finish was USC. Duke was a good team, and you struggled with them. In Northern Illinois we said this all last week. They are a quality group of 5 football team. Somebody even jumped in the chat saying I was like Lou Holtz. And then he sent me an email later saying, hey, I wasn't criticizing you for it. He thought it was a good thing. And guess what? Maybe that's what the Notre Dame players needed last week. Guys, this is a good football team. If you don't take them seriously, they can give you problems. But they didn't buy it, unfortunately. Salty Virginia Peanuts, buy, sell, hold. at least partially as a response to the issues in the NIU game, the Notre Dame offense will more closely resemble Mike Denbrock's recent offenses in the remainder of the season's games. I sure hope so. I'm going to buy because I want to be positive. I need to see it, but yeah, I want to see that. More movement, more aggressiveness, more speed coming off the line, more urgency, playing with more. I mean, it's almost kind of like LSU had a sense of urgency last year on offense because they had to score every time they touched the ball. They played with urgency. They played with speed. They played with focus because they had to. Maybe this team kind of got a little bit complacent because they have a great defense and they don't have that same urgency. And they could use a little of that. So I'm going to buy that just to be positive because it sounds good to me. I sure hope so. Oh, right. Buy, sell, hold from T-Bed 56. Buy, sell, hold. There are too many mouths to feed in the Notre Dame running back room right now. The focus should be placed on Love and Price with 5 to 10 plays a game with Ford. Personally, I feel like a running back rotation of more than 2 does not allow your playmakers to get into a groove and stay hot. I agree with the last part, but I sell the first part because I don't have any problem with Devin Ford having a role on this team, him or Aeneas Williams or Keidron Young. The issue that I have is that you need to know when to alter course on that. That's more of what my concern is. And when I look at this football team, I have no problem if on third down you want to get somebody in there to pass block. I don't need Jeremiah Love right now taking on blitzing linebackers. Would I do some things where I still have him on third down at times? That way teams know that, hey, we can go to this. Sure, because I think just the threat of having him on the field can maybe make teams get out of what they want to do, especially starts making more plays. But I'm totally fine playing through. And I usually played 3 running backs when I had coach running backs, and I had a kid who was an All-American that year. So I don't think that's the rotation as much as it is using them once you get in there. And that's more of the issue for me. I think Jadarian Price didn't play enough. I think that was a mistake. But I don't believe that you can't have 3 running backs playing. I think how you use those 3 running backs is more of the problem. And that's something that I would greatly push back on. Because like you said, kind of alluding to, your number 3 and number 4 running back should not combine for more snaps than Jadarian Price. That's a problem. That's absolutely a problem. And somebody asked, is Price so bad at blocking that he can't be even on the it's not about that he's bad at it. It's just that other guys are good at it. I would actually, if you're going to go, I would actually put Aeneas Williams in there as my third down back because I think he presents more of a threat with the ball, and I don't think he's any worse of a pass blocker. That I would absolutely look at him instead. Buy, sell, hold, Rhino 1134. Steve Angeli will start at least 1 game in 2024. I buy that just because Riley Leonard's already got a shoulder injury. And look, I don't know how you have that kid play and not still be a running threat. So there's always that threat of him. So even if he plays this weekend, I still think that there's a good chance that Steve Angeli's going to have to start a game this year. I was hoping that wouldn't be the case, but he's already injured. So you have to kind of look at it. Connor G, buy, sell, hold. We see a quarterback at Notre Dame this season other than Riley Leonard take the field and take meaningful snaps, not just in garbage time. I put these two together for a reason. Because they're kind of the same question, but just in a different way. And so if I buy the first one that Steve Angeli will start at least 1 game, then I certainly have to buy that one as well, that somebody other than Riley Leonard will take the field and take meaningful snaps, not just in garbage time. So I buy that one as well. And I think we are getting close to the end. I got a few more than I thought we did. All right, so we're still rolling. We've got several more. Ben Tarnowski, buy, sell, hold. After the loss, we will see younger guys step up to be vocal and emotional leaders in the team, referring to Jordan Faison, Jeremiah Love, Drake Bowen, Adon Schuler, and Jaden Osbury. I would be okay with that. I mean, if that's who they are and they're out there making plays, I'm okay. Look, if Jeremiah Love wants to get in front of the room and say, hey, we got to step up, we got to do something. Hey, man, you're the only guy on the offense right now making plays. Yeah, listen to him. And if some veteran's like, hey, man, sit down and shut up. You're just a sophomore. Well, hey, I'm a sophomore out here making plays. I'm playing hard. So, I'd be okay with that. It's got to be natural, though, right? Those guys have to have that mentality. They've got to be playing. They've got to be leaders already. They've got to be making plays. So, yeah, I could see that, whether it's by example or stepping up. Yeah, but here's the thing: it can only be in a vacuum, meaning there's a you don't have that right now, and one of them steps up. If it can't be a situation where if a captain's in front of the team room speaking, you jump up and start talking, right? Or if it's even in a meeting room, it's got to be natural. But I'm okay with that. Leaders should lead whenever. I mean, like, that's the thing is there's no way you're only this, so you can't lead. No, bullcrap. If you're out there playing and leading and you've got that personality, do it. Do it. I'm all for it. Ben Tarnowski also has this one. Buy so hold. At the end of the season, we'll look back on the Northern Illinois game and say it was the most undisciplined the defense played. Golden will get them right. I'll absolutely buy that one. Because, again, it's about track record. Why am I more concerned about the Northern Illinois game from a Marcus Freeman standpoint, from an Al Golden standpoint? It's because of track record. We've seen this type of thing from Marcus Freeman more as the head coach. We haven't seen this as much from Al Golden's defense. So I'll buy that. Buy so hold. Fran Brown will lead Syracuse to an 11-1 season and play for the ACC title. Look, they had a nice win this weekend over Georgia Tech, no doubt. I talked about that on Thursday or Friday as a potential upset game. They won by 3 at home. They still have to play Stanford, should be a win. At UNLV, that will not be an easy game. At NC State, at Pitt, home against Virginia Tech, at BC, at Cal, home against UConn, home against Miami. Is an 11-1 season completely out of the realm of possibility? No. Do I expect it to happen? Absolutely not. I'd be shocked if they went 11-1. If Fran Brown leads Syracuse to an 8-4 season, he did a heck of a job. Heck of a job. No doubt. So I'm selling that one, but it'd be a fun story, though. It'd be a great story. Scotty G, buy so whole. With the consultation of his experience and trusted staff, Coach Freeman will change his offensive philosophy before the end of September to open the offense and let the kids play to their strengths regardless of who the quarterback is. I hope so. It's a hopeful buy. And it's not so much opening up the offense as much as this just being willing to be more aggressive. Chief Brody says, Bryan, my Michigan going 7-5 pick is looking pretty good, isn't it? Well, I had him at 8-4, 7-5, 8-4. So yeah, I would say so. But this is a game that I thought they'd lose to Texas, so I'm not surprised by that. But yeah, I'm going to buy that one, Scotty G, just out of hope. I hope he does. They need it too. Leon Hart, buy so hold. Notre Dame finishing the season 11-1 after a spark from a QB change plays significantly different in the eyes of the College Football Playoff Committee, rather than finishing 11-1 with Riley Leonard when comparing Notre Dame's resume to 2-3 loss SEC and Big Ten teams. I reject that entirely. I'm selling the heck out of that. If Notre Dame's 11-1, Riley Leonard's your starter, he remains your starter all season, and you're 11-1. That is going to look much better in the eyes of the committee than you make a quarterback change and go 11-1 that way. Or at the very least, it's going to look the same. I think it would look probably not as good because if Riley Leonard's your quarterback, your offense probably gets better. At the very best, you can say it's a wash because it's not an injury to your quarterback. It's your quarterback wasn't playing well, new guy comes in and he plays. So no, if they bounce back from this game and go 11-1 and win their next 10 games and beat Louisville, who's currently ranked in the top 20, beat USC, who's ranked outside the top 10, beat Florida State, beat Georgia Tech, they're going to be a playoff team, and I think they would probably be looked at just as well as they did the other. So Chief Brody says, I disagree. Remember that bump they got in 2018 when they switched to book? They didn't get a bump because they switched to book. They got a bump because they went 12-0. They would have not got a bump if they'd have gone. So what you'd have to say is they would have if Notre Dame goes 12-0 with Brandon Wimbush, they would have not been as viewed as highly as they were under Ian Book. So are you going to tell me that if Brandon Wimbush stayed the quarterback and Notre Dame went 12-0, that Notre Dame would have not been the 3 seed in the college football playoff? Is that what you're telling me? Because Notre Dame was the 3 seed, and the only team behind them was a team that had a loss in Oklahoma. So are you telling me that the committee would have had a one-loss Oklahoma team over Notre Dame, a 12-0 Notre Dame team, if Brandon Wimbush was still the starting quarterback? Right? They never lost a game with Brandon Wimbush. Brandon Wimbush never lost a game in 2018. They were 3-0. They didn't lose with Brandon Wimbush. They didn't get a bump with Ian Book they got a bump in play from Ian Book. Sure, you could say they played better, but the premise of this is not that if a quarterback comes in and they run the table, that they'll be a playoff team. Whereas if Riley Leonard stays, they're not going to be a playoff team because they won't win all their games. Sure. But the perception of Notre Dame will be stronger if your starting quarterback plays better and you win. You guys get this, right? They can't go 10-0 if Riley Leonard doesn't play better. If they go 10-0 down the stretch and Riley Leonard's your quarterback, it means he's playing better. The perception will always be better if your starter is playing well. And they'll look back at this game and say, if anything, it'll be this. Hey, new guy in a new system, dynamic quarterback in a new system. He was banged up. He missed all spring. Once he got right, that offense was pretty good, and they went 11-1. You're going to look better there than if you put your backup quarterback in the game and just out-talent your next 10 opponents. At the best you could argue is that it's a wash. In no scenario can you give me any evidence that a team makes that change and has the same record they would have had and they got a bump. And the 2018 example is a bad example because, again, they never lost with Brandon Wimbush, number one. And number two, you can't convince me that they would have been ranked lower if Brandon Wimbush stayed the quarterback and they went 12-0. Explain to me how they would have been ranked higher or lower if Brandon Wimbush stayed the quarterback and they went undefeated. That makes no sense. No sense. They got better when you put Ian Book in the game, and that led to them going undefeated. But the question is not if they're both quarterbacks lead them to 11-1, are they going to be considered better with the backup coming in the game than with the starter? That makes no sense. No sense. So I'm selling that. Bracketed cover 3. By so whole, Purdue is going to stack the box and have their corners play man-to-man all game long, even with their best corner injured out. I don't know about stack the box because I think that's kind of already what they do. So I don't know that I would. I mean, I kind of buy that. Yeah, I'll buy that just because that's kind of already what they do. That's kind of what they do. Bracketed cover 3. By so whole, the SEC does have 4 of the 5 best teams in the country. I'll sell that. Right now. I don't know that we definitely know who the best teams in the country are right now. I think we think we know, but we really don't know. I would say for sure that the SEC has 3 of the best teams in the country, and Georgia, Texas, and you could either make a case for Bama, Ole Miss, or Missouri, but like Bama didn't look like the world on fire this weekend. I mean, Ole Miss, they haven't played anybody. Missouri hasn't played anybody. Tennessee hasn't played anybody. It beat NC State. That's a good win. You could maybe argue that. But, I mean, you talk about who they beat. I mean, right now we're still basically ranking teams based off preseason perception. Well, why is Miami not considered that? They've got a talented roster. They blew out their opponent this weekend by 47. They beat an SEC team on the road by 24. Why isn't USC considered a top 5 team right now? Right? They blew out Utah State this weekend, 48-0. They played a number 13 team in the country and beat them, an SEC team. So right now, everything is still based off our perception coming into the season. If we were going off of what you've done this season, then USC is not outside the top 10. USC is only outside the top 10 because they were ranked outside the top 20 when the season started. USC held Utah State to 191 yards of offense, and they had over 500. They also blew out in week 1. They blew them out, and also week 1 beat what people consider to be a really good LSU team. So I don't know that we know who the top 5 teams are. They certainly have the top 4 of the 5 ranked teams. I mean, that's the polls. They have 6 of the top 7 teams I just don't agree with that. That's where they are. That's the perception of, oh, the SEC is great and everybody else sucks because the SEC is beating up on a bunch of bad teams. Go SEC. Buy, sell, hold. Should Steve Angeli play, the sack against number will go up substantially, unless the offensive line plays better. Sure. I mean, Riley Leonard's got them out of some bad situations. There's no doubt about that. Darvis, buy, sell, hold. Coach Freeman is going to finally show a dynamic offense rest of the season starting this Saturday. I'm going to buy that out of hope. Look, as an analyst, I have to see it, right? I have to see it. I mean, you don't often see teams go from absolute train wreck the first 2 weeks to just lighting the world on fire that very next week. Doesn't happen often. I need to see it. So analyst-wise, sell. Hopeful fan-wise, I'm going to buy because it's possible they have the talent. I just have to see it. But I want to be optimistic going in this game, so I'm going to buy it. Buy, so hold. The offense continues showing a lack of receiving yards, mostly at receiver. Recruiting a game changing receiver will be difficult. Sure, if that's the case, then buy. If the premise you initially said is true, then the second part will be true also. So it'd be a buy. Got a super chat from Bill Shepard. Thank you, Bill. Buy, sell, hold. Northern Illinois stays ranked, goes undefeated, wins the MAC, and makes the playoff as a 12 seed, making this loss, although ugly as heck, not as detrimental as a whole. Okay, so if that happens and they go undefeated and win the rest of their games, and so that would mean they beat they would have to then let's go to their schedule. They'd have to beat Buffalo this weekend. They'd go on the road and beat NC State next weekend. Or no, they go to Buffalo next weekend because they got to bye this weekend. End of September, they go to NC State, beat NC State, beat UMass at home, at Bowling Green, Toledo at home, at Ball State, at Western, home against Akron, at Miami of Ohio, Central Michigan, and then a rematch with somebody, most likely, in the MAC game. So they'd have 2 road wins over Power 5 teams that were ranked to start the season. They would be a playoff team in that scenario, certainly, and it would make the loss look not as bad, but it's still bad. I don't care how good a MAC team is. They should never beat Notre Dame. Ever. So, but in your scenario, Bill, does it take some of the sting off from a college football playoff resume standpoint? Certainly does. Here'd be the interesting thing. It's like if Notre Dame runs the table and Northern Illinois is undefeated and makes the playoff, how do you justify having them ranked behind Notre Dame? I mean, what you're going to hear is, well, the overall record is better. A resume for Notre Dame is better. Notre Dame had more good wins than Northern Illinois. They played a tougher schedule week to week. Okay, that's fine. But they beat Notre Dame. They beat NC State on the road. So that would be fascinating. I don't see Northern Illinois going undefeated, however. But again, guys, I don't care. I don't care if they beat NC State. I don't care if they go 12, 13, and they would actually be 13-0. It's still a bad loss. But to your point, Bill, from a playoff committee standpoint, it would look much better at that point in time. Good stuff. Thank you for the super chat, Bill. I really appreciate that, man. Okay. All right. Let's go to John A1. Buy, so hold. Northern Illinois will win the MAC. I'll buy it because I think they have a shot. I said this last week. I said Northern Illinois, Miami, and Toledo, in my opinion, were the 3 best teams in the MAC. So they have a shot. It's going to be how does his Coach Hammock's team handle this win? Do they stay locked in? Do they kind of start feeling good about themselves, or do they stay humble and stay hungry? That was a hungry football team that came into Notre Dame Stadium. Do they stay that way? If they do, yeah, they got a shot. They got a very good defense. They're incredibly experienced. Somebody in the chat put up something about how they had high number of players with 40 career starts. We talked about this last week. We talked about how experienced this team was, how veteran this team was, and it wasn't a bunch of veteran portal guys. It was a bunch of their guys, meaning they'd been in that system forever. And that helped them. And that's going to help them in the MAC. I said last week, this is one of the best teams in the MAC. It still shouldn't have beat Notre Dame. But, yeah, they're a very experienced team, and they have talent. And we also they got a couple NFL players on their team, too. John A1 says, buy so hold, the Notre Dame offense we expected will be on display game 6-12 in 2024. I'll buy that. I think 6-12 gives me greater confidence that they'll get it right by then than starting now the rest of the season. Like I think the more likely thing is that they kind of they play better this weekend, and they play better against Miami of Ohio, and then better against Louisville, and then kind of break out the second half of the year. I think that's a little bit more likely than this weekend they go out and hang 40 plus on Purdue and then just roll. I would love if that happened. But if I'm being practical or going off of how it normally goes, I would say it would most likely take some time to get to that point in time. Get better, but don't become what you're supposed to be until second half of the year, which is what John points to. So I'll buy that. Somebody says Marcus Freeman has never lost 2 games in a row before. Yes, he has. He literally lost his first 3 games as a head coach, and he literally lost the first 2 games of the 2022 season. So he has lost 2 games in a row before. Just so we're clear on that. Buy so hold from BA5083. Marcus Freeman has too many voices in his ear and is confused on what to trust or how to coach. I'm gonna push back on the confused part, but as far as too many voices in his ear, that I buy. That Marcus Freeman needs to do more dictating and less being dictated to. And I'm not talking about from assistant coaches. I'm talking about from strength program. I'm talking about from people in the athletic director. There's all these type of things where I think he's being dictated to, and he needs to do more dictating. Some of it he likes to do. So all this going around and shaking hands and kissing babies and all that kind of stuff. Then sure. But I mean, he's got to put his foot down and say, hey, look, I got to do a little less of that stuff. You know what I mean? So, yeah. I don't like the confused part, but the rest of it I buy. AST 12321. Northern Illinois will be viewed as a head-scratching anomaly after the next 4 games. I sure hope so, dude. If it's not, this is going to be a long year. I really hope I'm buying this because it needs to be true, because this is going to be a miserable month if it's not. So, yeah, I'll buy that. Buy so hold from Tommy Guns 44. More than an 11.5 called pass plays where at least half of the routes on those plays are any variation of stops, hitches, comebacks, etc. Well, I'm going to buy that because the comebacks and stops are a big part of what Notre Dame does. I mean, they run a lot of 4 verts, and if you bail on a 4 vert, if you play off against a 4 vert, you're going to either run a stop or a comeback. I mean, that's I'm okay with that. Their best pass concept that Mike Denbrock crushed people with in 2023 or at LSU had a hitch and a quick option route, like you're referring to, as part of that read. There's nothing wrong with those things. There's nothing wrong with those concepts. It's just, and I'm okay running more than an 11.5 where a bunch of those routes are that way. You just have to mix it up with some other things. You've got to give them some, if you're going to give them, 12 horizontal stretch type plays or those, you got to give them some other stuff that puts different pressures on their coverage structure. Because right now it's easier to defend what they're doing because everything attacks you in a similar fashion. A horizontal stretch is that they're running attacks you in a similar fashion, and you're not running enough counter concepts that, okay, if you're going to play us this way to stop this, you're playing coverage this way to stop our slot fade. So then we're going to have some stuff to come at you with and to hurt you with. That's more of what it needs to be. Chris Y. Buy, sell, hold. Notre Dame versus Purdue will be the catalyst to make a change in Freeman's offensive philosophy, not the loss to Northern Illinois. I'm going to sell that because if Northern Illinois doesn't do it, then I don't know that anything will do it, to be completely honest with you. I mean, if he doesn't get to that by now, I just don't think it happens. So I'm going to sell it because I think if it's going to change, it will have already changed. And again, it's not about offensive philosophy as much as, I mean, it is, but it's just about the mentality that you're creating in the room. That's more of where it comes from for me. So that's my slight pushback on that. So that's going to do it for today's show, everybody. Thank you guys so much for being with me today. I know it got off to a bit of a rough start, but we got rolling and hopefully it was a good show and you guys enjoyed yourselves. So that's going to do it for today's show, everybody. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. We'd greatly appreciate that. And if you've not done so, come join us at the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Be back tomorrow, 1 o'clock for our prediction show and our keys to victory. Then Bill Bender and I will preview this week's games. There's a couple interesting games and not a great docket after the way that some of the games went this weekend, but we'll still be here. And then, of course, Friday, I'll be here for the mailbag. I'm not heading over to Purdue till Saturday morning, so we will be here for a full mailbag on Friday. So I hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day. And 12 minutes, IB Nation Sports Talk gets started, so be there for that. And then I'll see you guys again on tomorrow, 1 o'clock. Be ready. Me, Ryan, Trevor, and then Bill Bender. We'll preview Notre Dame and Purdue. We'll make our predictions. And then, of course, we're going to definitely talk about some games. We're going to talk about that Kansas State-Arizona game. I'm very much looking forward to that. So have a great rest of your day, everybody. And I'll talk to you guys again soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.